Good evening, and would you please call the roll order? Call us to order and call the roll.
Absolutely. We'll start the meeting. So start with you, Commissioner Bundy.
Here.
Commissioner Rizzo.
Here.
Commissioner Metcalf.
Here.
And Commissioner Bendel.
Here.
And just for the record, we'll note that Commissioner Chairman Chase is absent this evening.
Okay, the first order of business is an urgency action. Are you going to give us the staff report, Adam?
No, I wasn't planning on doing so.
I
Can
don't know.
if you like.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Sure. We were, as you might know, at the town council meeting, the last town council meeting, they had a similar urgency action with the Assembly Bill 361 signed by Gavin and Newsom. It requires that all bodies, councils, commissions of local jurisdictions adopt certain findings that allow teleconference meetings to continue. This is through 2024. We would see on the discussion items here on the staff report, same as the town council went through last week. We would adopt this resolution 20-014, that's attachment 1 to the staff report. That allows these teleconference meetings to continue. With this legislation from the state, it suspends certain Brown Act requirements for teleconference meetings. For example, previous teleconference meetings before COVID required a staff member or a commission member to be present on the premises at the normal meeting location. It required agendas be posted at each teleconference location of each committee or commission member, and it required the public be able to address individual commission members at their location of teleconference. So those are suspended with this legislation as before. And what's unique now is that we need to adopt the resolution every 30 days or at our regularly scheduled monthly on a monthly basis on these meetings. Why they didn't go with 31 days, so some months have 31. So you'll see this come up on a monthly basis on our consent calendar. And that's the same as town council is doing going forward.
okay. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the resolution?
I think we have
Approve
to,
the resolution.
hold
What?
on. I think we do have to open this up for public comment.
Oh, okay.
That's correct.
Is there any public comment on this?
Give a minute for hands to raise. You can also use the Q&A feature for those attendees who don't want to speak but want to type a comment. I don't see anything at our public comment email. And Vice Chair Metcalf, I don't see any hands raised from our attendees either.
Okay, who would like to make a motion to pass this resolution?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Is there a
Second.
second?
Second.
Okay, would you call the roll, please?
Sure will. Commissioner Bundy,
Yes.
Commissioner Bendel,
Yes.
Commissioner Rizzo,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Metcalf.
Yes. Okay. Now we'll be back at our regular agenda setup, and that is open for public comment. Any item that does not appear on the agenda tonight, any member of the public may make a comment on if they wish. Tracy, do you have any hands or
I don't
emails,
see any
etc.?
hands raised. Vice Chair Metcalf, for those attendees, if you wish to comment on anything not on the agenda, you can use the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom window or the Q&A feature, or you can email public comment at tcmmail.org. And I don't see any hands raised or Q&A or emails.
Okay. Then we'll close public comment and go to the next item on the agenda, which is the consent calendar, and we don't have any issues tonight. So we'll move, and there are no continued hearings, so we move to item 6, new hearings. The first item on that agenda is 317 Redwood Avenue. And Phil, would you please give us a report?
Yes, I will. Thank you. Vice Chair Metcalf and members of the Planning Commission, members of the public. The item before you this evening is design review application for a new 2-story, 3,207 square foot single family home and the demolition of the existing residence at 317 Redwood Avenue. This item came before you twice as a preliminary review and is now before you for the first time as a formal application, formal public hearing. Let me just get my screen going here and I can show you a brief PowerPoint that I have. Share screen. Sorry about that. I lose the ability to. There we go. Okay, everybody see that?
Yes.
Mhm.
Great. So yes, design review for 317 Redwood Avenue. I went through a very similar PowerPoint back in September when this came before you for the second time, and it came before you for the first time in June. And so this is kind of an updated PowerPoint from what transpired the last meeting. Let's see, get things to advance. Here we go. So project location, just at the base of Christmas Tree Hill, very close to the intersection of Redwood Avenue and Corte Madera Avenue, just about 4 lots moving up Christmas Tree Hill on the left-hand side. A relatively narrow and very deep lot that starts out at flat for the first 100 or so feet is relatively flat lot, and then it dramatically slants upward and terminates at Hill Path, walking path, and Redwood Avenue as it wraps around up the hill. The main change that's taken place from the September preliminary review is modification of the site plan, and specifically the shifting of the building away from Redwood Avenue, away from the sidewalk. And the commission expressed a desire for that to happen. There were some numbers given, but not a specific request. And so the applicant looked at this closely and determined that what fit best for them and thought would meet the intent of the planning commission and some members of the public was to slide the house back approximately 3 feet away from the front property line. So the whole home is being slid back towards the rear of the lot. So this results in a 3 foot larger front yard and consequently a 3 foot smaller flat backyard. The backyard is, I'm roughly defining the backyard as the back of the home to the retaining wall that's behind the redwood tree as just a point of reference. Certainly the backyard goes all the way up the hill, but the usable backyard is decreasing by 3 feet, and the front yard is increasing by 3 feet. Just very briefly, if anybody's new to this, the proposed first level of the home consists of the great room, a living room, a formal dining room, a good size mud room, and a 2-car garage. Stairway leading up to the second floor is where you have the master suite and a total of 3 bedrooms. 3 bedrooms and including master suite bedroom, another additional 2 more bathrooms as well. You also have walk-in closets in all of the bedrooms, and you have an upper family room in this area here, looking to the east. So that's your proposed second floor. Front elevation consists of this. image here, these dashed lines are showing where the roof was decreased, or the building was decreased in height by approximately 1 foot 9 inches from preliminary review 1 to preliminary review 2. In reducing the height, they also reduced the size of some of the windows by kind of bringing down that gable. It made the windows slightly smaller. For an elevation, obviously 2-car garage, front door, and front porch. Rear elevation, again, reduction in height shown here with the dashed line, and dashed here is showing the existing house to give you a perspective, size and location, size of the existing house in relation to the proposed house. The east elevation, which is facing towards downtown Corte Madera, is facing kind of slightly down the hill. This elevation looms a little bit more over the neighbor to the east. It's relatively close, and many conversations with the neighbor to the east, and it was decided upon as a way to mitigate her concern regarding privacy impacts, was that these windows down below here will be non-operable and will be frosted or opaque, so to minimize privacy impacts of folks looking down from the new house to her backyard. They went as far as to agree upon, the applicant and the neighbors went as far as to agree upon a deed restriction that will state that these windows shall be frosted and remain frosted for eternity unless that deed restriction is mutually agreed upon by both parties to change. To soften this elevation as well, the applicant reduced the size of the fence here. Originally a 6-foot fence, now dropped down to I believe 3 or 4 feet. So that's your east side elevation. West side elevation, which looking up towards Christmas Tree Hill, looking slightly up the hill. Guest bedroom and bathrooms. There was some discussion, you'll probably hear some discussion of this window. The neighbor to the west was looking for some compromise or some change to this window to minimize her privacy impacts. As you see in the staff report, I visited her home. She is at 325 Redwood Avenue, Miss Hubbard. And in your staff report, you have photographs taken from many of her both lower level windows, and it's a 2-story house, her second level windows from her guest bedroom and from her master bedroom looking toward the story poles. At the time of the staff report, and to my knowledge, there hasn't been any modification of this elevation proposed by the applicant at this time since the last prelim. Just a brief summary, nothing's really changed from the prelim. Floor area ratio of 38%, where code is 40. Lot coverage is 26, code is 40. The project meets all the setbacks. Actually, the one change from the prelim is setback is going from 10 feet to roughly 13 feet. Again, just to remind you, Christmas Tree Hill doesn't have specific front setbacks. It varies upon project. However, just as a point of reference, originally the building was 10 feet from the front property line, and now it's roughly 13. Side setbacks are increasing from existing, from approximately 4 feet on each side to exactly 6 on each side, and rear setback is quite a bit, well over 100 feet. Building height has gone down over the course of the project and is now at 28 feet 2 inches. Parking will go from 2 uncovered parking spaces, kind of in tandem, to 2 covered parking spaces in a 2-car garage, with the ability to park 2 more cars in front of that 2-car garage. Just a list of things that, revisions that have taken place by the applicant to the project based upon comments from the Planning Commission and the public during the last two prelims. As just pointed out, the house has been moved 3 feet away from the street. The roof height has been reduced by about 1.9 feet. Second level east side windows, non-operable and opaque. Some of those windows are reduced in size, change in the front fence height, and fire resistant English laurel hedges have been planted going up the hill on the left-hand side to minimize privacy impacts that were expressed by the folks at 10 Hill Path that would result with the loss of the redwood tree. Some items that have not been revised or changed: the overall size of the home has not been reduced. Both the redwood tree and the mulberry tree are still proposed to be removed. And as mentioned, no modifications to that second level west facing. Actually, that should be second level. Yeah, that's right. Second level west facing window for the western neighbor. Yeah. So based upon that, staff is able to make all of the findings. There are clearly some privacy impacts. Staff feels that these are not significant impacts and that the applicant has done an adequate job and a good faith job in working with the neighbors on both sides and up the hill to the left to mitigate those privacy impacts as much as possible. And staff is able to make all the other design review findings and recommends the commission approve the draft resolution, which is attached in the staff report. That concludes my presentation, and I have the findings here if you want to discuss any particular findings. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions for Phil?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Phil, does the deed restriction have to be in effect before the building permit's issued?
No. I mean, the deed restriction is completely a private, a private matter between the two parties. It's not. Yeah, it is something that they have worked out and they have agreed upon. I guess we never actually had this before myself. If it's the wish of the commission to strengthen that deed restriction and have it a condition of approval that the deed restriction shall be signed and sealed prior to building issuance, that condition can certainly be added, unless Ann says differently.
Okay.
That is, I believe, the commission's discretion. If they think it's necessary to make the findings to have that agreement in place, then they could impose it as a condition of approval.
Okay. I was just wondering, because if it doesn't, then could there be issues after the building permit's issued that it actually takes place? Right.
That would be between the two private property owners.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I have not. I don't know if that neighbor is on the line. I have not heard specifically from her that she desires it to be a condition of approval. But
Well, maybe she'll speak up when she's got the chance.
entertain that. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. That's all I have for Phil. Thank you, Phil.
You're welcome.
If I may follow up on that, since this is a home being built on spec, how does that work? It's not as if the applicant will be the owner. Once it is built and will be put up for sale. I'm asking.
It runs with the land. It runs with the land. But go ahead, Ann.
Oh, yes, the two private property owners presumably would enter into an agreement that would be recorded against the property that would run with the land, and therefore it would be binding on all future owners.
Okay, so it can be the current owner who is not planning on living in the home.
Yes, it can be.
Okay. Are there any other questions from commissioners? Okay, we'll open it up to the public.
Or, I'm sorry, Commissioner, Vice Chair Metcalf, I believe the applicant has a few comments they'd like to make as well,
Okay,
depending on your discretion, which order you've taken.
Yes, hello, I'm Tyler Shelton at Polsky Polstein Architects. Hello, everyone, again. I can't see myself, but if you can see me, I hope I'm
okay.
presentable.
We can't see it, but it's okay.
Okay.
Your audio is loud and clear.
Yeah, well, I shaved and everything. Oh, well.
Oh,
Like Phil said, this latest submittal shows I'll just, elaborate on it slightly. All we've done is moved the building 3 feet south, away from the street from where it was before. No other changes than that, other than the gates at the side yard, where they attached to the building they moved, and the rear yard is 3 feet smaller, and the front yard's 3 feet bigger. The driveway's longer, the front path is longer, and but there have been no other changes to anything in terms of landscaping and planting and drainage and those sorts of things. The end result of this, as I see it, we made this change reluctantly. We really would prefer the building in its original location. And, the reason for that is it just, compromises the backyard area so much. I mean, we had a very small backyard area to begin with, and now we have basically a 9-foot strip of probably artificial turf back there. So it's become a building or a home where, the backyard really isn't a place for children to play. It's more a place for a old man to practice putting. It's just in my opinion, quite inadequate. And if we had our choice, we would prefer it in its original location. As a designer, I'm satisfied with the building itself, I'm really looking forward to seeing it happen and take shape. But if I were the owner of this property or the occupants of this house, I would, if I was raising a family there, I'd certainly want more room for my children to play in the backyard. But more relevant to this is, and I think that the owner is here with us, and Dimitri Rigolopoulos, who's been instrumental in doing the neighborhood outreach, he's with us this evening, and they can both chime in. They've been working very closely with all the immediate neighbors, namely Jackie Hubbard at 325 Redwood Avenue and Liz Miller at 315 Redwood Avenue, and Deborah and Daryl at the 10 Hill Path up behind us. And they're getting feedback that if these immediate neighbors had their preference, they would prefer not to move the building back. Deborah and Daryl, only because the building is 3 feet closer to theirs, and and it's more impactful in that respect. With Jackie Hubbard on the west side, I think the impact is less apparent, but basically what it does is it aligns the two buildings more closely. I mean, she's about 40 feet away. She's some distance away, but just from my perspective, it seems it would be much nicer if she had more, if the buildings were offset more, that she could have more of a corridor of natural light, leading out from, the perspective directly away from her house. But impacted most of all, I think, is Liz Miller at 315 Redwood Avenue, where, this house that was looking over her rear yard and, imposing upon that area by about, 25% is now sort of imposing about, almost half of it. So if she's here with us, I'd really like her to chime in and tell her concerns, because I do think she has some. Other than, these immediate neighbors, I think that previously we had multiple, letters of support from neighbors beyond. And as far as I know, none of them had any objections to the position of the building on the site. So just to summarize this one issue here, we, the applicants, would prefer to see the building in its original location. We think it just makes more sense. And we can push it back a little bit from the street as a gesture. And I think that from the street, it has a very, subtle and not very noticeable benefit, but it certainly has a noticeable impact, for the occupants of this house, primarily just their backyard area and their natural light within the backyard area. It just seems to me that, for all concerned, the house would be better in its prior location. But we made this application to show you, moving it 3 feet and the impact that would have. Another issue has arisen since our last hearing regarding, and I think Phil touched upon this, is the concerns that Jackie Hubbard has. Again, that's at 325 Redwood Avenue. And her concerns of the gable window at the west elevation. I don't know if you can bring that up, Phil. There it is. It's a big window in a bedroom there, and the windows to the left and right are relatively small. They're all bathroom windows. This window is a bedroom window, and it's pretty big. It's I think it's 42 inches wide, and I think this was her concern, and I think that if we could look at the floor plan, I'm putting Phil to hard work here. If we could look at that second floor plan, you can see at the top of the plan that bedroom, which is the guest bedroom. It's like the nicer of the bedrooms, other than the master. It has a little ensuite bathroom. So, this, in my experience, this will likely be the little girl's bedroom. It always ends up being that way. And we just want that room to be very nice. It's not very big, but it has a nice vaulted ceiling, and it has a nice big window to bring in natural light. And I don't see this as a huge privacy impact. Looking through the glass of this window 40 feet away through the glass of another window in another building, I think this is a bedroom, and I think that it's used at nighttime when people are drawing their shades and they're getting ready for bed. It's not a room where people congregate and admire the view. But I just want this to have a nice big window, just so that it has natural light, and it's a really nice interior space. I also think the building looks better from the exterior with a window that's in proportion with the gable. Anyway, that's my feeling on that, and I do appreciate the concerns of Jackie Hubbard, and we do want to make her happy, and I hope that we can, come to some arrangement with her so that she is satisfied. But personally, I don't see this as a huge privacy impact. We've made a lot of effort to mitigate any privacy in that direction in the yard below with planting along that side. But the planting is not as high as this window on the second floor. So that's about all I have to say about this most recent submittal. And I think I would like to pass it over to the owner, Dan Morgan, who's had more direct contact with these immediate neighbors. And I think that he can elaborate on their interaction. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. Pleasure to be here again. Tyler has beat the east side to death, but I do want to say I've been doing this for 35 years, and Liz Miller is the most impacted neighbor that I've ever dealt with, and she has demonstrated the most reasonableness and ease to work with, and agreeable and willing to listen to reasonable decisions. I mean, I came up with the deed restriction to address her concern. I've never done that before. And by the way, Mr. Rizzo, and commissioners, I'm happy to agree to a condition that the deed restriction is recorded prior to building permit. That's fine. But anyway, I want to respect Liz. What she did mention is she didn't, if the house moved back the 3 feet, the gable on the east would impact her more. As a matter of fact, the way it is now, the gable is above the garage. And if we moved it back, it would put another window in her looking down in her backyard. That being said, I did hear what the commission said last time at the last meeting, and out of respect, I am willing to move the house back. Prefer it in the front. I think as a parent that can corral his kids in the backyard, the backyard is more important than the front yard for the most likely buyer who's a family that's going to purchase this house. That being said, I want to make the point that this house is 19, 20, and 21 feet back of the sidewalk as it is now. And the reason for the different numbers is because of the curve. But at the garage, it's 20 and 21 feet. So this property can easily park 4 cars in its proposed configuration, in its originally proposed configuration. I think that's all I have. And thank you for your time and this process, and appreciate your help.
Does the applicant have anyone else who wishes to speak? All right, well, now then we'll open it to the public comment, and each person will have 3 minutes, which will be timed. So Tracy, what do you have?
Hi there, let me get a timer up. For those that need a visual, I do see Liz Miller has her hand up. Let's get Liz here. Hang on. Go ahead, Liz, you want to unmute yourself? You should be able to.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Let's see. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, thanks. Yes, I do think the house, to my way of thinking, is better at the original placement. I live primarily in the back part of my house. My family room, my bedroom, my laundry room, my bathroom are all towards the back of the house. And the lighting comes more from the back than the front. And also, this is a large family house, and I think Dan mentioned that, you know, a backyard is really important to a family. A front yard is not, it's just decoration. And the other houses on the street do seem to be quite a bit closer. I would prefer to see it in the original location there, so there's a little bit more space. I want to have happy neighbors. The window situation, I've been happy with the way it's been working out. I am concerned about the film versus having actual etched glass or whatever. I did recently hear about a type of laminated glass where there's something in the middle where cleaning agents and that won't scrape off the film that was proposed. I'd like to see something that would be permanent and not be something that can be scraped off. Dan and I talked about the retaining wall, which is actually, with the agreement of the original owners, was bumped into my yard, but I'm a little concerned. I don't want to have problems with any neighbors in the future, and I think it would be best to have it actually on the property line so that if it did fail at some time, it would not be on me or my children to have to repair, replace that, at least the way I understand property rights on that. Because it's very important to me not to be having arguments with neighbors in the future. It's very important to me this is my home as it has been for 50 years, and it's important that it's a happy place. And I think that's about all I've got to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tracy, do you have anyone else?
I think so. Let me give our attendees a moment here. Anyone else? You'll be utilizing the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom window or the Q&A right next to that. I'll check email while we give
Yeah,
everyone a
yes.
moment, if that's okay.
That was my next question. What about email?
That email address for our attendees is publiccomment@tcmmail.org.
And
I do know that we had one late letter that was received at public comment, and Phil has that, and we can read that into the record at the appropriate time.
yeah.
And one
I
question
was
in
gonna
the
mention
Q&A
that same
was,
thing, if we
I
did
can-
get some late correspondence, and I just want to acknowledge, Phil, if you could just acknowledge that those were sent to commissioners and that they saw them.
Yes, I'll acknowledge that two things. One, there were some late correspondence that was emailed to the commissioners. It was also emailed to the applicant earlier today. And then there was also an email that came in later this afternoon that was not emailed to anyone, but I have in front of me here that I would like to read into the record if this is the appropriate time for that.
Why don't we see if there are any more comments from the public, and when they're finished, why don't you then read the letter, Phil?
Okay.
thanks, Vice Chair Metcalf. I do see Deborah Sartell has her hand up. Deborah, go ahead and unmute yourself when you're ready.
Hi, this is Daryl Hawthorne, Deborah's husband. We just wanted to chime in support of not moving the house back. We're in complete agreement with Liz that it should remain as far forward as possible. We also have a second question about hazardous waste abatement. We understand that a hazardous material report is a condition of issuance for a building permit, but we're not clear what the town's process is for abating hazardous waste if it's found in that report prior to any demolition. And if that could be clarified, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. Yes.
Let's keep going. We can address the after public comment.
Do you have any other comments to make right now?
No.
Okay, so Phil, why don't you respond?
Sure, certainly will. I'll respond by saying that, yes, the Sartells sent an email to me, and I checked with our building department, and yes, there is a condition that's required with any demolition or remodel, that any hazardous materials for any home built prior to, I want to say 1978, and any hazardous materials such as asbestos or lead, needs to be identified, and what's called a J number needs to be acquired by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and so that those hazardous materials are identified and are and the applicant identifies how they're going to be properly disposed of through the proper channels and sent to the correct facility. So that is a built-in process that we have for remodeling and demolition of old structures.
Thank you, Phil. Tracy, any more hands? And I noticed there was something lit up on QA.
I think we answered the Q&A that was in regards to whether letters received after the packet was published were received by the
okay.
commission. There's one additional Phil will read at the appropriate time. I do see an additional hand or hands. I saw Spencer has a hand up now. And I think Miss Jacqueline Hubbard had a hand up earlier. I'll give her a chance to raise that again. When we could start with Spencer. Go ahead, Spencer, please unmute yourself when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Hi, my name's Spencer Sales. I live on a house in Madera Gardens. I've been following this application as it's come up for a couple study sessions over the past couple months. I think it's a stylish design and a nice modern house for our village area, and I hope it gets full approval, and looking forward hopefully to seeing it get built soon. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And you said the next one was Jackie Hubbard.
Yes, Vice Chair Metcalf, it looked like her hand went down. I'm going to go ahead, Jacqueline, I'm going to allow you to talk. If you wish to talk, please go ahead and do so. Let us know.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 Okay, great. I was having a little trouble with my computer, so I wasn't sure. I was trying to talk, but I wasn't sure. So my question is this, you know, I am very concerned about that window, and the window looks straight into my house, in my kitchen, in my bedroom, and in my guest bedroom. So I know that Tyler mentioned it wasn't a problem, but it is a problem because it's square on to my house. And I would like to know why there is not, it's a guest bedroom. We don't know whose bedroom it's going to be, but it's not a view window. The person that's looking out that window does not see anything but my house and me if I'm in the room. So my question is there any other way that we can treat that window that is not just staring right into my home?
Are you finished with your comments?
You know, and the other comment I would like to make is if they're putting the film on Liz's side for the bathrooms, can that also be put on my side in the bathrooms? And that's the end of my questions.
Are there any more people, Tracy?
I don't see any more hands raised right now, or any Q&A. I will check email. And no emails, emails either.
Adam, shall we ask the applicant to respond to these first, or should the other commissioners ask questions first? Which would you prefer?
don't know if you want Phil to read the
Oh,
letter he has,
yes.
that came.
Okay,
Okay, why don't you read the letter, Phil, and then we'll figure out next step.
okay, thank you, Vice Chair Metcalf. Yes, this letter is written by Janie and Carl Wilford, and this is the individual who asked that this be read in the Q&A. Janie and Carl Wilford are at 328 Redwood Avenue, so that is across the street and I think slightly up the hill. And they write, again, sent this afternoon, dear Planning Commission, as a concerned neighbor, we are providing our response to the development of a new 3,207 square foot home and 458 square foot attached garage at 317 Redwood Avenue. While we feel this development is too large for the site and will be a visual change for the approach up Christmas Tree Hill, our main concern is that large trees are being unnecessarily removed rather than creatively integrated into the architectural design, and thus it will negatively impact the beauty and character of our neighborhood. Specifically, we do not agree with the removal of the redwood tree at the back of the property for these reasons. First, per the arborist report, the redwood tree is in good health, good form, and fair to good structure. Number two, the redwood tree is over 50 years old and has a circumference of 182 inches, qualifying it as a heritage tree per the Corte Madera Municipal Code. The redwood tree has historic value, and the removal will have a negative effect on the beauty of Redwood Avenue and Christmas Tree Hill. Fourth, large trees like this redwood provide energy conservation and climate control and privacy. And lastly, the project does not retain the natural features of the site, which is a Christmas Tree Hill overlay requirement. In our opinion, the redwood tree is an asset to the property and the neighborhood. There is an opportunity for this tree to be designed as an integral, beautiful part of a creative site plan and perhaps smaller home design instead of just removing it. We hope that the Planning Commission will not allow for the removal of this redwood tree and instead protect and preserve it. Sincerely, Janie and Carl Wilford, 328 Redwood Avenue.
Okay. Now, Adam, back to my other question. Shall the applicant respond to Jackie Hubbard's comments and any of the other people who spoke, or should the commissioners discuss this first?
Well, go ahead.
I'm throwing it in your lap.
No, I think it's a good question. I think it's fair. Typically, we would either close the public
Yes,
comment portion of this, and then it would just come back for questions for staff
yes.
and discussion amongst the commissioners. But if you want to reopen or basically have the public comment period, I would suggest that. And if you have consensus amongst the commissioners that you want to reopen the public hearing to provide responses to some of the questions that have been raised and have the applicant respond, that you can do that.
Well, I haven't closed the public hearing
All right.
yet, so I don't have to worry about reopening it. I just think since these comments and questions were asked by the people who called in, that the applicant should have a chance to respond to them, and then we can get into our discussion. And that would be appropriate?
That would be within the chair's discretion.
Okay, well then, at my discretion,
I
that's
think
what I would
yeah.
like to do.
That's great. And okay, I was just going to say that what we don't want to get into is this, just the back and forth at time and time again. But
Right.
This is
Vice Chair Metcalf, we hadn't, the commissioners hadn't had a chance to ask questions to the applicant either.
Well, we would do that afterwards. I thought he could, I know we would discuss it afterwards and ask questions after these. There were 2 or 3 points that were brought up that I thought the applicant should have a chance to respond to while it's fresh in everyone's mind. So if the applicant would like to respond to the comments made.
Yes, I'd be happy to respond. And one of the windows that Jackie mentioned that she'd want to have frosted, those are relatively insignificant bathroom windows. And I said before that just as she doesn't want people looking into her house, I don't think that we want that either. So we have, privacy is a big concern. The 4 smaller windows in the bathroom, I am happy to do some partial frosting on those. But the thing I've been struggling with this uphill orientation of Jackie's house to the proposed house is, with Liz, it was easy because Liz was worried about people standing on the second floor, looking down into her house. So the easy solution to that was frost the windows so that unless somebody's standing right up against the window, they can't see down into her house. With Jackie's house, it's a little different. We're lower, so it's looking up. The view corridor is looking up. And that's a little more difficult to frost the top because we want to let the light in. I don't know how to, I'm willing to keep my neighbors happy. I don't know what to offer or how to offer it at this point because it's difficult to stand in that house without having the floor there and see exactly what the impacts are. But I'm happy to those windows are not important to me. And in fact, I can commit to frosting the window in its entirety that's in the shower because I don't think anybody wants a window in their shower. And the other windows, I'm happy to get with Jackie after the floor is built, just like a compromise I made with Liz, and come to some agreement. I have no problem doing that, especially where the toilets, there's 2 toilets and a shower. It's very likely that those might turn out to be better off frosted. So that's my response to her questions. Was there something else that you wanted me to respond to?
It was basically the comments made by Jacqueline
Yeah.
Hubbard.
You know, she's voiced these concerns. She's been lovely to deal with, and I plan on remaining a neighborly neighbor even after the house is sold.
Okay, let's close the public comment section. And now we'll go to the commissioners to ask any questions. And Jim, why don't you go first?
He's muted.
Oh, unmute.
I got myself.
Okay.
So Dan, if I'm hearing you right, you're willing to frost or laminate or whatever you want to the windows to either side to satisfy the neighbors on the lower panes. How about that bedroom? Would you be willing to do the lower? I think that was her real concern was the bedroom.
Jim, I know, and frosting the lower, to the short answer to your question is yes. My concern is frosting the lower half of a window where you look at a trajectory up doesn't do anybody any good.
Yeah.
I don't want to agree to a condition that we all get together at the end of when the house is built and say, gee, that didn't work. So I'm happy to do, I can tell you, I'm happy to do 100% of the window in the shower. I'm willing to agree to that as a condition. I will reluctantly agree to whatever other conditions you put on the other windows. I just don't want to tie myself into something that even Jackie stands there and says, gee, that didn't do any good. And I'm afraid frosting the bottom of a window on an up-looking eyesight might end up in that category.
Okay, and the film, is it a film or is it a laminate? Like, are you guys going to do the laminated glass, like the 2/8 inch laminated with the opaque
We
film
can
in the
do
middle?
that. The only experience that I have with privacy glass is the film that is put on. It's put on professionally. It's done well. It doesn't react to chemicals. We can sandblast it. It's a little more expensive. It's in the deed restriction to if it comes off, it has to, if the window breaks, it has to be replaced with like kind. I don't have any experience with anything other than the film.
Okay. My second question would be about the landscaping in the back that's not going to be in the way of the construction of the house that's going to be added after the redwood tree and all of the acacias are removed. Would you be opposed to having those installed as soon as a redwood tree is down to stabilize the hill and also provide privacy screening and allow for a year of growing season to pass before the structure is built so that neighbors don't have to look at the construction?
I would be willing to do that, and so this is quite timely. We could get them in for the rainy season so they could have growth if we got an approval tonight.
I think that would help out a lot with the noise and the privacy issues. And the last thing I have is the retaining wall that's going to be on the east side. Does that retaining wall, I'm looking at it, is it going to be 3 feet higher than it exists today, plus a 6-foot fence?
No, the retaining wall, and Liz and I have talked about the retaining wall, and the retaining wall is currently about 30 to 36 inches. It varies a little bit.
It does. I took a walk there today.
And it is primarily on her site. So and I'm going to replace it wherever we all decide it's going to be replaced at my expense. But her concern, Liz, and I'm sorry that you and I didn't get a chance to talk about this. Her concern of sharing it with a neighbor and creating liability for her heirs or herself, I think it would be better for her to have the wall on her property line, because then there's no question that it's her responsibility, but nobody's going to enter into an argument because it's all on her property. If it's on a joint property line, it's subject to argument. But that being said, I'll put it wherever she wants. To answer your question, it's 3 feet, and then there's a 6-foot wall on top of it. And I think that would provide a better aesthetic for her, and I'll put it anywhere on her property that she wants it. But I think that a planter, even a 12-inch planter, to have plants go over it, and there's not much liability on a 3-foot retaining wall. They don't fail that short. It's the bigger ones that fail typically.
Yeah, I was there today. It looked like the retaining wall in the back was a little bit more than 3 feet, and I was just looking at the plans on details 3A 2.4 and section BA 3.1, and it seemed like we were raising the grade to accommodate a grade change at the property line, and I was just concerned that the fence would get really, really tall. Sort of hard to tell at this point, but one of the sections, it looks like you guys are raising the retaining wall 3 feet.
Her retaining wall?
Well, whatever retaining wall we want to call it on the property line. Section BA 3.1.
I don't have the plans in front of me, but there is a higher retaining wall than 3 feet, Jim, but that is right up against the garage. So that's not something, and there's drainage below it. And again, I don't have the plans in front of me, but if you're referring to that portion of the retaining wall, her garage is built within inches of the property line.
Oh yeah, I'm aware of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a retaining wall that will be higher than 3 feet, but it butts up, and it appears to be at grade level. I mean, her gutter line, her tails of her rafters are 3 or 4 feet off the ground. So that tells me that that's what's going on there. I do know in the backyard, I don't believe it's anywhere. If it's any higher than 3 feet, it's a few 6 inches higher. But it's because it's a variable backyard. But the grade that you're talking about, I believe, is at the garage. And then it goes down to 3 feet, a 3-foot fence after it passes the face of her garage.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I think also back to the retaining wall location. I think Liz was referring to that wall being on your property solely, but she can, if we need to confirm with that, Phil, we could always ask her before we close public comment. I think that was she was thinking that if it was on the applicant's property, that she wouldn't be responsible for repairing it. Not the other way around. But we can ask her that. That was all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Margaret, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I just have comments, which probably could go in the next go around.
Okay. How about you, Bob?
Yes, I had a couple of questions for Tyler and Dan. In regard to the new back retaining wall, is that going to be at the site of the existing retaining wall behind the redwood? And I'd like to comment that it would be nice to preserve redwoods as much as possible, but sometimes they're just too big for tight neighborhoods and the ability to really remodel. And because this is a codominant trunk and has some inherent dangers to failing, I'll support the removal of the redwood. But I want to understand what's going to happen once the redwood is out, the stump grinding takes place, the roots are out. Where is that retaining wall, and how far is that going to be from the back of the house?
Tyler, I'm going to let you answer that.
Yes, well, we had assumed that the retaining wall that is currently there, it's a wooden retaining wall made of pressure treated wood. We would just, where it says existing wood retaining wall, that would be kept, although it may be unrealistic to expect that to stay, after the process of removing that redwood tree. But if we have to replace it, it would be replaced, the same, or in exactly the same location. The other retaining wall, the new retaining wall, just to the right of it on that diagram there, I'm showing about 2 foot 3 inches high. There's an existing retaining wall there now that is, crumbling away from the pressures of that redwood tree. And we were thinking of that would be a planter, because we sort of have to build up a little bit in order to get to the base of the existing one. So, that has been our plan, is to keep the wooden one and replace the lower one, the lower concrete one. So, it's sort of been part of the landscape plan from the beginning. And we haven't made any changes in that area.
Tyler, it seems to me that once you get the tree out, the stump out, and there are just some huge roots that are there, which are characteristic of redwood trees of that size, that both retaining walls will be unstable. And I think the idea of a planter and a new retaining wall makes sense. I was just trying to get a sense of how far this is from the back of the house.
Right. Well, let's see, I don't know if I have a dimension on that handy, but
I saw one.
It's somewhere on my computer, but my computer has a Zoom meeting underway on my computer, and I can't look at it. I'm looking at it here at to give you a sense. That main retaining wall is about 25 feet, it appears, from the edge of the lower floor that you're seeing in this diagram.
Okay.
So that's about where it is. But the base of that wall is uphill a ways. That's the purpose of the lower retaining wall. If we were to excavate back there, we would have a big wall, and rather than the existing wooden wall and the small planter wall at its base. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think you're telling me that it looks like you're going to end up with a big retaining wall, which I think would be okay because that'll, give you more of a backyard there to use. Because I just don't see the retaining walls or the back one as it exists today being able to stay there once that tree is out and the root structure is out and you've cleared that out. So I would be okay with a higher retaining wall and maybe a short planter just in front of it as you're already proposing. Let me ask on that west window that Ms. Hubbard is concerned about. Since it doesn't the main purpose is to get light in, and aesthetically, I agree the size of the window balances out the house, but it's only really viewed from 325. And if the purpose really is to get light in, because there isn't really a view of Mount Tam because of the Hubbard residence that's already there, could a raised window, sort of clear story window, be used in place of that? And if there's a need for more light, since it's a gabled vaulted ceiling, be able to have some skylights either on each side or a ridge skylight that would allow more light to come in. Is that something that's been considered?
It hasn't been considered. Well, I suppose it's been considered as a possibility. That could be a window with a very tall sill, but the sill would have to be 6 feet off the floor in order for it to have any impactful on privacy, and it would reduce the amount of natural light. It's good to have the natural light up high in a room of that shape with a vaulted ceiling. But my concern with that is just the nature of light and the nature of looking in and out of glass. I mean, if we were to take a walk down the street this evening in the dark, and we would walk past a window that's lit up, we could see clearly what's going on inside that window, inside that room, assuming the curtains weren't drawn. But if we take the same walk during the daytime, it's hard to see inside someone else's home when the ambient light outside is greater than the ambient light inside. And I just see this as a bedroom, and the people in this bedroom are going to be more concerned with their own privacy. And during those times of day, at night, when bedrooms tend to be used, the curtains would be drawn. So, I mean, we can, skylights and ridge skylights in particular are an expense, and they do complicate the lighting plan and the ceiling plan and all those other things that I have envisioned for the interior of this building. I think anything is possible, but in this situation, I don't think that it's going to make a really an impact that's really going to be that beneficial to anyone. But I can only give you my opinion on that. If we're standing at a window and we're looking through glass and we're looking through 40 feet of space, and then we're looking through more glass into another space beyond that, in terms of privacy, and I don't see it as a big privacy impact. I would see it if it was a privacy impact on an outdoor area, but looking from an indoor area through an outdoor area into another indoor area, I don't see it as a significant impact. I do, you know, other projects that are far closer, you know, than 40 feet or so, or whatever this distance is, 39 feet, 7 inches. You know, in terms of my experience, I don't see this particular situation as being, you know, one of a big privacy concern. So at the same time, I think that everybody on our team is interested in you know, satisfying Jackie's concerns, because she's been you know, very kind and civil to everyone, and we certainly want to do what we can to make her happy. But I just want to do something that's actually going to, you know, to make a difference, as opposed to, you know, something that's that really, you know, has very little impact at all. I want something that's going to make a real difference. Anyway, I hope that helped.
Yeah, I think from viewing the story poles from Ms. Hubbard's lower and upper floors, you know, it does seem like this is a big window that is there. And of course, nobody really likes change, and we have to, you know, get used to things. But since this isn't a view window and the issue is light, by having a 6-foot sill and a window above it, and you've already got a nice skylight set up over the stairwell, that 1 or 2 skylights on each side, you know, which are not as expensive as ridge skylights, as you point out, should provide really adequate light into that bedroom. So that's my thought on looking at the perspective from 325, as well as trying to understand the use of the bedroom and the need for light, which I agree is important. The other concern that I had before, and I certainly understand why the immediate neighbors, especially Ms. Miller and 10 Hill Path, you know, would like to have the building minimized and as far away from them or their back as possible. But last month when we discussed this, I felt that the building needed to go back 10 feet. And when I now see the story poles, I still feel that there's just a lot of mass that's to the front of the building that isn't in character with the immediate homes on each side. And I think it's also possible that Ms. Miller's home will be redeveloped at some point. And I would make the same point that I would like to have the setback at least somewhat similar to what it is at Ms. Miller's house, if that got redeveloped and a new home built there, that I feel about 317. So I think, Dan, you've made a decision that you needed a house of a certain size, and so you're just trying to fit it into the building envelope as much as possible. But I think from the neighborhood standpoint, the scale of the building, which is very nice, and I really like what Tyler has done as far as the character of the building fitting into the neighborhood, but I do think it needs to be further back. And I know that is not something that Ms. Miller likes to hear or 10 Hill Path likes to hear, but from my perspective on it, there's just too much mass that's too far forward and is out of character with the neighborhood.
Thank you.
That's all.
Okay, thank you, Bob. I have a couple of questions. The retaining wall. Is that something that we have to decide, we the commissioners, before we take a position on this tonight? And my question is actually for Ann Danforth.
So is the retaining wall part of the current application? I have to admit, I didn't study the plans that closely. If it is, you do have to make a decision on it tonight.
Of its placement.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Pursuant to the findings, right? You're
Yes,
viewing
and
this through the lens of the findings. And if you think that has any significant if that factors into the ability for the commissioners to make the findings, then you're certainly welcome to opine on that and pass judgment on that.
Yes, that's a better way of saying it, actually.
Thank you. I was looking at the photographs that Phil took of from the Hubbard house. And I'm specifically looking at these pages aren't numbered, but it would be let's see, 1, 2, the third page that has a subtitle of guest bedroom. And I noticed that that room has 2 large windows. And from what Dan Morgan was saying, that in this particular case, because of the siting of the Hubbard house to his house, this is above. Is that correct? This is at a higher elevation, the Hubbard house?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And that the top windows would be the ones that would have to be frosted or whatever, opaque in this case, and not the bottom ones. Was that correct, Phil?
The discussion of frosting windows for Miss Hubbard's benefit,
Yes.
is just beginning now. There hasn't been any specific proposal of where to frost. The applicant has mentioned, pros and cons of frosting the different types of different areas of the window.
Okay, but 315 is at a lower elevation.
Correct.
325 is at a higher elevation.
Correct.
So it sounds as if, and if I understood Dan Morgan correctly, it's the top of the windows that would be the issue this time rather than the bottom of the windows as with 315. And I wonder
That
if
was the
I'm
argument.
getting that straight. All right. If so, looking at these 2 nice sized windows that are the guest room, I don't know if that's a valance I'm seeing or a shade that's pulled up, but I would think that using a Roman type shade or a valance could cover part of the window, that the top of the window, if that's the concern. Because I think it would look rather odd to have that window there that's in the dormer with the top half of it opaque. And even changing the style of it, I don't think would go with the house itself. So as I say, I don't see, why a shade or a valance or something couldn't partially cover the window, especially a shade that would then be lowered at night when the people are going to use it as a bedroom. Let's see, the retaining wall. Okay. I understood that redwood trees had spreading roots. Is that correct? Where some trees grow very deep and others spread further from the base of the tree itself. Is that correct?
From conversations with the arborist at the site,
Yeah.
He mentioned, and he's the one who wrote the arborist reports, that redwood trees' roots tend to spread a great distance.
Okay.
Yes.
If that tree is left where it is, those roots will continue to spread. And they will impact first the patio or terrace and then into the foundation of the house eventually. That tree is too close to where the house is going to be, especially now if we continue with the house being moved back 3 feet. So I think that the retaining the redwood tree, I think, is a dead issue at this point, that we would go along with the prior decisions about that. And I think that's, I can't even read my notes, sorry about that. Okay, now it is time for us to have discussions amongst ourselves, the commissioners, and who would like to go first?
I'll go first, Phyllis.
Thank you, Margaret.
I went by there today because I wanted to see again about the setback and how far back it should be. I agree with Bob. I think for the size of the building, which is going to be a size that's saleable to a family moving into that neighborhood and paying the prices that they'd have to pay in that neighborhood. The size is big, it's looming, and it needs to be, in my opinion, set back from the sidewalk. And even if it does make the backyard smaller,
There is no.
there are lots of backyards in Corte Madera that are that small. Townhouses have small backyards too. It's a big house with a lot of playroom inside. The house has one of everything, and I think if the backyard is smaller, but it allows people on the street not to feel like something is looming overhead, I think that's a plus. And I like the extra setback that's been added. It bothers me a little to hear all this discussion about making windows smaller, less visible, covered up. I like the big windows in any room. I like the big window in a bedroom. If anybody is in a room, they want a window, a good sized window. They don't want it etched and covered up. At night, you put the shade down. In the daytime, you have the shade up and you let the light in. No one is going to stand in a window looking down at somebody endlessly. Nobody wants to spend their time doing that. And I don't think that all these windows should be screened and covered up. A window is just that, a window to look outside and let the light come in. I'm not sure about the question of the retaining wall because it depends who wants to be responsible for it. But I think the point about putting it right on the property line that causes a problem might cause a problem in the future for where both people would have to agree on the same thing might be an issue. So I would say either put it on one side of the property line or the other. And I agree about the redwood tree. I have a big one in front of my house and it's a lot of maintenance. The roots are miserable to deal with. And if it's not, it just seems to be a real problem for that piece of property. And I think it just needs to go. I think in the future, if people want to make the backyard bigger, which seems to be an issue, they can start terracing the hillside there. You've got a big hillside, it's going to be beautifully planted. Start terracing it and make more room that way. But right now, I think the setback, that's my big issue. And the big window, I think it looks nice in that building, and I think it should be open and people should have the benefit of a nice window. Otherwise, I think that the builders and everybody involved, the architect, have been very, very accommodating and to neighbors and to neighborhood outreach. And I think they're to be commended for how they've gone about this. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, any comments?
We do. So while we're talking about the front setback, one of the things I wanted to bring up is 315 Redwood has a lot shallower of a lot. And when that house does come back to us as a 2-story house, which it probably will, it's probably going to be set really close to the front. So if we want to have any continuity with these houses next to each other, Mrs. Hubbard's property it's a beautiful property, and I don't know of any others that are that majestic and large in Corte Madera. So it's sort of an anomaly. But when I look at Miss Miller's property, it doesn't go back as far. So whoever's going to build next or put an addition on that house is going to go forward, especially if there's no setback requirements for this Christmas tree hill overlay. So I would say I would almost support it being where it is now or where it was originally, just because of the fact that I think at a later date, we're gonna come up with a situation where we're gonna have to deal with the continuity of these two houses again. So as long as those two cars aren't on that sidewalk and we can get 4 cars off the street on that street, then I think that the builder did a good job getting the parking requirement established, in my opinion. As far as the retaining wall, I don't want to ever see a property line fence retaining wall issue like we did a few weeks ago. So I think that we should pick a side, and I would almost put a condition on it that the applicant put it on their side of the property line, and they're responsible for building their fence and their property line. I don't think that Miss Miller needs to take any responsibility for something that's already existing and going to be ripped down and rebuilt by somebody else that's not going to live there. So, and as far as that retaining wall goes in the back where the redwood tree goes, I mean, I don't know if we should even define where that's more of a building department thing, in my opinion, where those retaining walls, as long as it holds that hill up and it's not massive. And they might not know exactly where that retaining wall is until the root ball gets grinded up, like Commissioner Bundy had said, like, who knows what kind of hole that's going to leave in the backyard. And there might be some other landscape opportunities that happen to develop as that tree comes out. And I'm really keen on putting a condition together with the landscaping trees going in, or at least a verbal agreement with the applicant for all the mature trees that are going to go in the backyard. I think it's going to really help the neighbors visualize the screening effect of the new design, because I thought the landscape architect did address some privacy concerns with what they specified. Lastly, these windows in the past, we've always specified that they be clear story windows. and as long as the applicant and the neighbors are okay with the film, then I guess I'm okay with it. But I do think that we haven't really completely addressed Mrs. Hubbard's concern. And when I look at the building sections in this application, I mean, I see the privacy concerns on their main living space being on the lower level, which is looking down, which is the lower panes, which is a similar treatment to what we have on the other side of the house. There are bedrooms on the second floor of 325 Redwood, but there are also secondary uses compared to the yard. And with a big yard, if you're standing there, you're going to be able to see all the activity in that big yard. If that house was closer to the proposed development, you wouldn't really be looking straight down, because you'd be looking at a side yard setback, but you're actually looking at our living space. So I would actually move to, if we're going to approve the film, then the film should go in the lower panes of that big window as well, if they don't raise that windowsill. So those are kind of some of the conditions I'd like to consider as a group, because I think they're super important and to consider. Thank you.
Okay, Bob Bundy, comments?
The sense that I have is that the house should go further back. The issue of the retaining wall the back retaining wall will go where the back retaining wall needs to go once that tree comes out. And that I would favor a clear story window with the ability of Dan to put in skylights on that west window facing the Hubbard house.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. Well, my thoughts are there isn't much of a backyard that is usable. Terracing is a beautiful thing to see, and I know a lot of people who do it, but that doesn't create play yards for children, and this is being looked upon as a family house. Phil, could you put up that slide again that shows the house and the yard? You know, the setting on the property. No, the one that we look at from above, that one. Proposed second level. It's probably a good way to look at it.
That one there?
That doesn't show enough. You have another one that showed, maybe it was the downstairs, that it showed the terrace and it showed where the redwood tree would come out.
Okay, that's
Pretty
this.
much this one here.
Yeah, sorry, that one there. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've got
right.
another one,
But that'll show enough. There isn't much of a yard. I mean, there's very little. This is just moving it back 3 feet.
right.
And I'm an old non-putter. So I don't need a putting green. But I would like to see more of a yard. Now, if it was moved back the way Margaret and Bob would like to see it moved back, it's going to go right into the hillside.
Well, as
there's
the
no
slide
yard.
shows, Commissioner Metcalf, the backyard will go from a relative depth of 29 feet to a relative depth of 26 feet. This is from back wall of building
Yes.
to first retaining wall directly
Okay.
behind tree.
And what is the width of the terrace they're showing? Looks like it's about half of that amount.
The width of the terrace between retaining wall 1 and retaining wall 2?
The terrace
Or-
where we
or terrace.
see, it looks like it's supposed to be paving stones, yeah, where the chairs are.
Approximately
That's
11 feet.
Okay, and then it leaves about 16 for the yard.
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's moving it back 3 feet.
correct.
Okay. I cannot see moving it back any further. I thought the 3 feet was a good idea the last time we looked at it. I'm beginning to think that maybe we should move it back to 10 feet from the street rather than 13 and have some more space in the backyard. Either one of those, but I can't see pushing the house back any further. And that as far as the windows go for Miss Hubbard, I would like to leave that for the applicant and Ms. Hubbard to work out rather than put it into the approvals. I think that they could talk about different variations and come to an agreement rather than us try to make one for them tonight. They say the redwood tree would come out. I think it's a good idea to have the retaining wall on one property or the other, and it's a better idea to have it on the applicant's side. Let's see. And that is about it that I came up with.
For Metcalf, just one thing I'd like to comment on, just regards to one thing that Commissioner Rizzo had said about the landscaping going in advance, which I know was something that was agreed to by the applicant in the discussion this evening. there are some challenges with that from a Marin Municipal Water District perspective, and then discouraging the use of new landscaping going in at this point in time. Obviously, irrigation is limited, I believe, to once or twice a week. So it may not, and in general, they have been asking towns and cities to support discouraging applicants from actually putting in landscaping because of the drought situation until they lift the ordinance that they currently have in place. So just something for consideration.
Adam, is there an emergency? Like, I mean, if we're removing plants, I'm actually also worried about the whole hillside coming down. We got to support it with roots. Do you know, are you aware of any emergency action that we can take or the applicant can take? Because, you know, we're taking down like the acacia trees or some of those. I think that some of that flora is not very good for fire reasons, but
yeah, I mean, typically there's other means of soil stabilization. I mean, little small plants typically aren't the ones that are going to be helpful in that regard, but you put down the jute netting and other things that help sort of stabilize the hillside. And I'm not sure of the specifics on this. I don't want to design a measure here, but I'm just saying from perspective of what, you know, putting things in advance and the water usage, that may be challenging. So, you know, we can certainly make an attempt to do it, but if it fails, I don't want the applicant to be, you know, penalized or in violation of a condition of approval if they're actually not allowed to get water to those plants.
Yeah, I would think that the plants that are going in, the oak trees, are relatively drought tolerant, and nothing would be able to get started, you know, with planting until hopefully we do have a rainy season and something comes in. But if they don't put them in advance, you know, you would have to get those in with a crane, which would be, you know, a very expensive operation to put in plants that would be much easier to do when the house is taken out. So that's just my comment on that.
Yeah, there is an ability to do some, I believe, some hand watering, but there are restrictions on water use. That's all I'm saying from MMWD. And so that should be taken into consideration.
If you water by hose in Corte Madera, you're allowed to do it one day a week, and our day in Corte Madera is Wednesday, if I remember correctly.
And just for looking at the landscape plan, the oak trees proposed about halfway up the hill are proposed to be 24-inch box.
Okay.
If I may, I mean, it sounds like there's about 3 or 4, I think, Chair Metcalf, you outlined those, I think, generally, but does it sound like you want to go through and try to get some consensus on moving the house, you know, there's moving the house back, is that?
Okay, I think it comes down to the house currently is 13 feet from the front.
From the front property line.
Right. Before it was 10 feet, so from the property line. Margaret would like to see it moved back, and Bob would like to see it moved back. And I got the feeling that Jim would like to leave it where it is. Am I correct, Jim?
I'm okay with leaving it as it is or even moving it back to the 10 feet mark, just because, like I said, I just think that
I'm with you.
yeah.
Okay,
and the neighbors want that as well, the adjacent neighbors, the neighbors that are going to be living with it.
Okay, this is what happens when you have an even number of people. Bob and Margaret want to move it back, and Jim and I would probably be happiest moving it back to 10 foot from the front property line, but could accept the 13 feet. So now we have to try to convince each other, I guess.
Phyllis,
Margaret,
I just remember that Peter was very strongly in favor of moving it back last time when we talked. I realize he's not here,
Yeah,
but he was one of the people who was one of the stronger proponents.
yeah, I think the numbers he threw out were about 3 to 4 feet, and Commissioner Bundy mentioned 10 feet at that meeting, the last meeting. And I just for clarification, Commissioner Bendel, I thought you, at the beginning, you were agreeing with Commissioner Bundy about moving it farther back, but then you also mentioned.
No,
that
I
you might-
think they've proposed to move it back 3 feet, and I'm fine with that. I think moving it back 10 feet
Okay.
would be, I don't know what would be left of it. I think basically the terrace would probably butt up against the retaining wall.
yeah,
Is that-
No, that's a helpful clarification, I think.
yeah, that's,
But no, I'm fine with they've proposed to move it back 3 feet. I looked at the story poles today, and I think that's good.
So with that, then
I
there's
say I
the,
could go with that and Jim can go with that. I said my preference would be back to the original 10 feet, but I can certainly accept the 13 feet.
okay,
So that would be part of it. The next one was the retaining wall
no,
and the placement of the retaining wall. Any thoughts from Bob on whose property where should the retaining wall be placed?
Well, Dan offered to discuss this with Ms. Miller and put it wherever it was agreeable. So I would stipulate that they come to an agreement on that mutually.
Well, that's what I was thinking, but it sounded when Adam mentioned it and that we may have to do the placement now as part of the approval. That's what I was trying to clarify.
Well, it depends on whether or not you find it necessary in order to make the findings.
Okay.
If you think it's necessary to make the findings, then yes. I would note, however, that if the applicant wanted to construct any part of the fence on his neighbor's property, he would need that neighbor's permission.
Well,
It might be a problem that solves itself.
yeah.
It's drawn,
Technically, it's on her property at this point, but it's coming down and a new one being built. So the question is it built where it currently exists, or is it moved to the property line, which I think we all agree would be a problem, or to the applicant's property?
it's drawn currently, the drawings that we're approving, it's drawn on the applicant's property.
Okay.
So I would, by approving it, I don't think that we are specifying exactly where it is.
Yeah, I don't think we have to specify it.
Yeah, neither do I.
Sounds like the plans.
okay, address that one.
Is that agreed, Bob, Margaret?
Yes.
We would not address it at this point and leave it to the applicant and Ms. Miller to work out what is best. All right, that one. Okay, the placement, the redwood tree. I don't even think we have to discuss that. That's a given. So it comes down to the windows, Jacqueline Hubbard's window.
I
And
would propose-
is that something they can work out too without us? I mean, we're going to have as part of the approval, my understanding is what is going to happen with the Miller House at 315. And that would be part of the deed restrictions. Now, what is going to happen with 325? Since that has not had a lot of discussion and a lot of agreement between the applicant and the owner of 325. Bob?
I would propose that the window be a clear story, the sill at 6 feet, and the applicant would have the ability to put in skylights.
Yeah. I mean, I personally think a clerestory window would look out of place with the rest of the windows in the design of the house. Okay, Margaret?
I agree with Phyllis. I think the window ought to be left just the way it is. I don't see any problem with.
Okay, Jim? Any comments on the window?
You know, my architect eye is telling me I love the window, and I'm just trying to make
Yes.
sure that we
It works.
I know it does, but you know how we're applying some sort of application to the other side of the building to satisfy
Yes.
a privacy concern, and we're not. I mean, could we frost the lower half of that window, or and do the same application at least?
And make it part of the deed restriction?
Sure. I mean, if
I really think that
I
it's a bedroom window.
know. I tend to agree with Margaret that it shouldn't be such a big, important issue. Yes, the privacy is, but there are ways that can be worked out between the applicant and Ms. Hubbard without us being in the middle of it. And one of the things, we're talking about the privacy issue, moving that house 3 feet back creates less privacy than when it was 10 foot from the front property line. That 3 feet makes a difference. And that was shown in one of the, I think it's one of the slides that Phil put up.
I wish there was there's a gardening shed right in front of it. When I was out there, I could have, they've got enough room for a beautiful tree on Mrs. Hubbard's property that would work everything out, but it's just not gonna, and we can't make a condition like that.
No.
So Phyllis, you think even going up one window pane is gonna make it feel out of proportion?
I'm talking about putting in a clerestory window instead of that window as it currently exists. I'm not talking about whether you make it opaque or frosted or.
No, I mean, like if the window sill went up to another window pane, it would be up about 4 foot, 4'6", let's say, I think, if I scaled it.
Phil, could you put up a picture of that side, please? The west side?
That one there.
Okay, there it is.
So the sill's currently at 3 feet, and I believe those window panes are roughly 18 inches because of the
Yeah.
scale.
And it looks like they're in line with the other smaller windows, the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay. If it went up 18 inches and well, that's right, started there.
I mean, you're still going to get that beautiful view of Mount Tam, and you're not going to be looking down into the lower level of
If it
of the
went
house
up,
before.
if 1/3 of it was removed. Okay.
It's not in proportion.
Yes. If it came to that, I would rather frost the bottom third than remove it. I mean, personally, what I would do would be to put in Roman shades that open from the bottom up. But I'm not the one who's living in either house. So.
Adam, may I ask, if we leave it up to the applicant and the neighbors to work this out, I mean, what happens after this is approved and there's an issue? Is it it's really
Well,
nothing,
it would.
it's out of our hands?
Staff would defer to whatever's on the plans and the conditions of approval.
But if we didn't address it in the conditions of approval, Adam.
Yeah, well, there's nothing real other than we would encourage them to continue to work through their issues.
Right.
Certainly, but at the end of the day, we wouldn't have any ability to enforce some sort of some specific outcome. So, I'm not sure that, I think it just comes down to the commission's gonna have to decide if the window is adequate as is and it's a bedroom window and, sort of Commissioner Bendel's perspective, or if it's more something actually needs to be addressed from a privacy perspective, and if actually frosting some portion of it would actually accomplish that goal. And I think we've had that discussion with the applicant this evening, and it's unclear really if the bottom third is going to do much because of the uphill, but it's up to the commission. I think we're trying to provide as much evidence as we can. I think you've heard different comments from the applicant, from the neighbor on the uphill side. All of you have provided some information on that. So at the end of the day, it would be better just to make a decision on which what is the better. And I did hear there's the other piece of it was the applicant did say they would frost the bathroom windows to the side, to the side of this. But I think the focus is clearly on this particular larger window in the bedroom. So
I think the issue is the larger window.
yeah, it is. So I just think the commission needs to make a motion and see if there's, because it sounds like everything else has been,
Yeah, I think we have a consensus on the other issues that have come up.
Yep.
And I think we've seen more so than in most of the applicants that come before us, that there's really been a lot of work done between the applicant and the neighbors, and they're all trying to reach a consensus. And I commend both the applicant and the neighbors who have worked with him. And I don't want to make it difficult when they have done so much to move this far. So let's see, I mean, there is consensus that, I'm reading my notes. It appears that the house would remain 13 feet. Now I'm going to check again from the front property line. Is that agreeable to everybody, or do you want to see it move back 10 feet? We didn't ask your opinion, Keisha.
That's agreeable to me.
He's been behaving tonight. And his partner in crime is out of the room. So anyway, Bob, I think you're really in the minority on this, moving it back 10 feet.
I can count the votes.
So the question is it going to be 10 feet or 13 feet? Margaret?
13.
Jim?
I can go either 10 or 13 to make it happen.
I was hoping you'd say one or the other because I could go either way too.
Well, then if you can go either way, then we'll leave it with
13.
Margaret's.
Yeah, Margaret,
Thank you.
you got it. So that will be part of it, 13 feet. The retaining wall, we're going to ignore.
Leave it on the plan, as on the plans, I think is what the commission discussed.
Okay, so we don't have to talk about that in the approvals. At the hazardous waste you discussed, that really doesn't go into the
It's
approvals.
just the window.
anything.
The window is the last part.
If the window is the thing, and
Jim, Commissioner Rizzo, if you wanted to, I think for the landscaping, I would encourage the commission to consider to install if basically,
if MMWD allows.
well, yeah, if the plants can be supported in a way that doesn't run afoul of MMWD regulations at the time they are proposed to be planted, something like that.
That would be a great solution.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're back to the window. Can't ignore it.
As for a
Dan, what's
motion,
your
maybe,
solution?
Okay, my solution? The commission really has to ask itself whether or not you look at the distance between the two structures and the fact that it's a bedroom window, and ask if the privacy impact is such as is that you can't make the findings. And if you can make the findings, then there's no basis to change the window from that presented in the plans. However, if you think that there's a modification, if you currently cannot make the finding, but believe there's a modification that would enable you to make the finding, that would be the modification. I'm not hearing a strong consensus that the frosting the lower third, or even lopping off the lower third, would address any privacy impact. But I also haven't heard a strong consensus that there actually is this privacy impact.
That's, as I said, what I was questioning.
significant privacy impact.
Yeah, significant. So I think you should ask yourself that question and see where the commissioners come out.
I think it's, in my opinion, and in the homes that I've been in, environmental studies I've seen, it's a bedroom window. I never heard of a frosted bedroom window. It just doesn't work. The design and the size of the window fits the proportion of that side of the building. And I think it's far enough away, and there are mechanical ways such as curtains or Roman shades to take care of the nighttime kind of views you can see when it's lighted inside. I don't really think that the restriction on a bedroom window should be made.
I tend to agree with you. I'll tell you, I wish I had the time to stand there and look out a window. I mean, I would like to not address the window as far as our motion goes. And I don't know, Margaret, you say not to address the window as part of our motion.
I think the way the plan is now is what I can make the findings for. I can make the findings for the plan as it is.
Okay, and just leave it up to the applicant and Ms. Hubbard to
If
see
they
if they want to work something out.
Then more power to them. But right now, I like it very much the way it is.
Okay, Jim, can you go along with not addressing it in our resolution or findings, etc.?
I can. I still struggle with it a little bit because we're, the finding is about privacy. It's not about how beautiful it looks and how in proportionate it is, but it does look great. I'd love if Dan would agree to work with Jacqueline on some sort of mitigation on this window.
Without the commission or staff being involved.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. Bob.
I can count the votes.
I know you're good at that, Bob. Usually I'm the one out, so welcome to the club. Okay, how about if somebody makes a motion? Don't rush. This is when we need Peter. He gets us moving.
I'll make a motion. In the matter of the application PL 2017-0103 DRC for a new 2-story, 3,207 square foot single family home and the demolition of the existing residence at 317 Redwood Avenue. I make the motion to adopt the plans that have been submitted with the conditions that that the building is moved back 3 feet from the very most original plan that was proposed, that the issue of the windows and the issue of the retaining wall be left to the best judgment of the neighbors and the builders or owners.
Is
Best
there a
judgment.
Just point of clarification, Ms. Mendel, the plans that are in front of you and that they have submitted is for a home that is 13 feet from the front property line. So
Okay,
I think actually what you're saying is you are accepting the plans as submitted.
Yes, absolutely, yes, thank you.
Is there a second?
You want-
Second,
Thank you. Okay, Adam?
I'll take the
Roll.
roll, and we'll start with Commissioner Rizzo,
yes.
Commissioner Bandel,
Yes,
Commissioner Bundy,
No,
and Chair Metcalf.
Yes.
Sorry,
Okay, on a vote of 3-1,
Bill,
the
you want
motion
to
passes.
read the appeal rights?
And Phil, would you please read the conditions?
Yes, the appeal statement states that following action by the planning commission at a public hearing, any decision of the commission may be appealed to the town council within 10 calendar days. Appeal forms are available at the planning department and also in the town's website. And there's a $300 filing fee.
Okay. I'd like to suggest that we take a 10-minute break, if that's okay with everybody.
agreed.
good.
Thank you. And I can see what Keisha and Toshi are up to.
Thank you.
As my grandfather used to
Commissioners.
say, cats and kids are just the same. You can't help but love them and you can't control them.
That's true.
Okay, we're all here. So why don't we call this back to order? Next item on the agenda is 6B, Title 22, Objective Design and Development Standards. So Martha, you're on.
Yeah, I'm just going to do a little introduction and then turn it over to Martha. And really just say that this represents sort of the culmination of a lot of work by a lot of different people. And I just wanted to thank some people before we start. It's been a long road to get here. Obviously, this commission has been very involved in this process, multiple meetings and helping staff and our consultant team, Opticos Design, as well, sort of basically, create these objective design and development standards, and then also customize them really to cater to our town. And so that's been a big effort. I do want to recognize also, and really importantly, our technical advisory working group and community members, including Bill Rose, Patty Stolier, Dan McCadden, Rich Pearlstein, and then also, of course, our vice chair here, Commissioner Metcalf, and Mayor Eli Beckman for all the support and guidance throughout the last couple of years to get to this point, which is, and I'll turn it over to Martha now to really explain, we're at the sort of asking you here to consider a proposed ordinance amendment to actually bring these objective design and development standards into our municipal code. So big sort of significant milestone here today. And with that, Martha, why don't you go ahead? And I know we'll try to keep it relatively brief so we can get to discussion and any comments that you have.
Yes.
But go ahead.
Good evening, commissioners. This evening, you'll be considering an ordinance amendment to the municipal code. It includes a new Title 22, which is the Objective Design and Development Standards. There are also amendments to chapters 1550 1802, 1804, and 1830. We've been over a lot of this in past presentations, so I'll keep it pretty brief. The town received $160,000 planning grant in 2019, and we've been working with Marin County on several projects, one of which is the development of the objective design and development standards. The purpose of the toolkit, there's multiple phases to the toolkit, and the most immediate purpose is that it allows the town to address both current and future state housing legislation that is intended to prohibit and or limit local jurisdictions' discretion related to multifamily housing projects. And the ordinance amendments that are before you this evening relate to this phase 1 implementation. The ordinance amendments do not include any changes to floor area ratios or densities. And phase 2, which will coincide with the housing element adoption process, phase 2 of the toolkit. And I'd also like to point out that many of the standards in the toolkit will likely be refined in time as the toolkit is used to evaluate projects. The standards in the toolkit haven't yet been tested on real life projects. We've talked about all these bills in the past. There have been several housing bills that allow for by right streamlined approvals for qualifying multifamily and mixed-use housing projects. And I'd like to point out the objective development standards, which is highlighted in all of these different bills. Senate Bill 9, this is a new legislation that we have not talked about previously. This was recently signed by the governor, and it is set to become law on January 1st, 2022. There's a couple different components to this bill. It allows for a homeowner to legally split their parcel into 2 parcels with a minimum size of 1,200 square feet each, and then up to 2 units can be developed on each of those parcels. And the 2 units would include an accessory dwelling unit. It also allows for multiple units to be built on each parcel, and these are single family parcels. And this is in cases when the lot is not split. And this bill also requires that only objective design and development standards be used. And unlike Senate Bill 35 and 330, this bill includes some development standards related to setbacks and minimum square footage for the area of dwellings. We provided an attachment to your staff report, attachment 4, and it included several recommended changes to Title 22 to clarify that projects submitted under this legislation would, the toolkit would apply to them. So many of these bills limit the use of objective standards to evaluate projects. A few examples of an objective standard: structured parking shall not exceed 40 feet in height. And for each personal outdoor space provided, a minimum dimension of 5 feet is required in any one direction. Non-objective standards, on the other hand, these are standards that cannot be measured or require interpretation. And the design review findings are an example of non-objective standards. Some examples include produce high quality design or use high quality durable materials that age well. So for phase 1, the toolkit would apply to an application that's filed under bills that require ministerial review. So this is no design review. Currently, the only legislation that we're required to follow is Senate Bill 9. It's currently the Senate Bill 35 does not apply to the town and will not until at least 2023. For applications that are filed consistent with the Housing Accountability Act, an applicant would select either to use the objective standards in the zoning ordinance, Title 18, or the objective standards in Title 22. And in these instances, the projects would be reviewed by the Planning Commission. This slide shows some of the objective standards in Title 18. As you can see, the objective standards are fairly limited. They include such things as setbacks, height, floor area, parking, uses, and then some limited standards related to lighting and screening. So as I mentioned, staff has recommended a 2-term approach to implementing the toolkit. It includes both near-term and long-term strategy. And for the near term, the toolkit would be applied to qualifying multifamily housing projects. And as part of the long term, this would be undertaken along with the housing element adoption, and the toolkit is due, or the housing element is due to the state in January 2023. So as part of this kind of long-term implementation, there will be quite a bit of discussion with the community on how to plan for additional housing in the community. So as Adam mentioned, we worked with Opticos Design and also Plan to Place on the development of the toolkit. And we formed a technical advisory working group at the onset of the project. And the working group was comprised of 6 community members of diverse backgrounds and perspectives. There have been several meetings with both the working group and also the Planning Commission. And one of these meetings, the one in April, was a joint meeting between the 2 groups. And input and feedback from the working group and the commission has informed the customization of the toolkit. So the OBS toolkit was developed by Opticos Design. And Opticos is a design firm out of Berkeley, and they have developed numerous form-based codes for other jurisdictions in the state. As part of the toolkit customization, each jurisdiction decides which zones to adopt and where to apply zones within their community. The toolkit includes 8 zones. These range from lower intensity edge neighborhoods to higher intensity core neighborhoods and main streets. The 8 zones in the toolkit are within the T3 neighborhood, the T4 neighborhood, and the T5 urban core. In Corte Madera, there were 3 zones that were identified as existing, which include the T4 suburban neighborhood small, the T4 core neighborhood medium, and the T4 suburban main street small. And staff has also recommended that the T3 edge neighborhood also be adopted, and this would be applied in the instances that legislation allows duplexes and fourplexes in single family districts. So this is not an exhaustive list, but the slide and the next slide show the various objective standards that are included in the toolkit. The toolkit includes a variety of standards related to things such as building form, parking, landscaping, screening, retaining walls, slopes, privacy, building types, and architectural design. The chapter 3 of the toolkit, which is the zones, establishes the various development standards for the different zones within the toolkit. It includes such things as setbacks, height, and parking, to name a few. As we previously discussed, the Corte Madera General Plan includes several mixed-use land use designations. These were created in 2009. And one of the goals in the Corte Madera General Plan, which this project is helping us achieve, was to create multifamily design guidelines. This map shows the various parcels that have a mixed-use designation. We have 4 mixed-use designations. The mixed-use commercial is shown in teal, and you'll see those are mainly around the corridors. Also, the old Corte Madera Square is in Old Town, and those are shown in kind of that purple color. And then also there is a mixed-use designation to the village, and then to where Tam Ridge has been developed. And as you can see, multifamily development is permitted in the majority of commercial districts in Corte Madera. So the customized toolkit includes 4 zones to adopt, which include the T3 edge neighborhood, the T4 suburban neighborhood small, the T4 core neighborhood medium, and the T4 suburban main street small. So this map shows the zones that are assigned to each of the parcels in town that currently allow multifamily dwellings. And this includes parcels with a general plan mixed use designation, as well as parcels that are zoned R2. So the parcels shown in yellow have been assigned the zone of T4 suburban neighborhood small. Those shown in orange have the T4 core neighborhood median designation, and the purple is the T4 suburban main street small, which again is Old Corte Madera Square. Toolkit is organized into 12 different chapters. And this, the two of the chapters, chapter 8, which is the architectural standards, and chapter 9, which is signage standards, have been removed from the toolkit. And this was based on feedback that we received from both the commissioners and members of the working group. Many felt that the standards were too prescriptive. And so these standards have been used to create design guidelines, and the design guidelines will be provided to applicants, and they will be used to inform the design of the project. Okay, so before you this evening is an ordinance amendment that includes amendments to several chapters of the municipal code. An amendment is proposed to chapter 1550, which is the trees, and this would include a new exemption for a permit-sized tree to be removed pursuant to Title 22. State law precludes jurisdictions from requiring a discretionary permit for certain housing projects, and a tree permit is a discretionary permit, so for certain projects we cannot require it. The toolkit does include a standard related to replanting. So for any tree that is removed, 2 24-inch box trees would be required to be replanted. And this would be required for a tree removed that is 30 inches or more circumference. And this is the same, the size is the same as what is currently in the town's ADU ordinance. Amendments are also proposed to chapter 1802. And this chapter is being amended to revise the application section of the zoning ordinance to state the types of project that Title 22 applies to. And this includes both the multifamily or mixed-use housing development when a project requests streamlining in compliance with state law, and also projects that meet the criteria of Senate Bill 9. Amendments are proposed to chapter 1804, which is the definitions chapter. As part of the ordinance amendment, there will be changes to 6 of the definitions. And as part of the process, staff evaluated overlapping definitions that were within the zoning ordinance and the toolkit. And several of the definitions in chapter 1804 are being replaced with the definitions of the toolkit. Chapter 1830 design review is being amended to include a new finding related to the architectural and signage design guidelines that have been created. And again, these are standards from chapter 8 and chapter 9 from the toolkit. And this finding will only apply to multiple dwelling projects, which would include duplexes under Senate Bill 9. So the bulk of the amendment before you this evening is the new title, Title 22. And this is the objective design and development standards. And it includes the standards that will be used to evaluate qualifying multifamily projects submitted to the town pursuant to state housing legislation. As I mentioned, an attachment was included to your staff report that includes some changes to address Senate Bill 9. The first part of this slide shows the changes that were included within attachment 1, and those changes are to chapter 1 of the toolkit. In addition, some additional changes are recommended to section 22033030, and this is the zones chapter. And I have a document that shows what these additional recommendations are that I can share. So there are 3 options before you this evening. The first is to forward a recommendation of adoption of the amendment to chapters 1550, 1802, 1804, and 1830, in addition to the new Title 22 to the Town Council. The second is to make changes to the draft ordinance and forward it to the Town Council. And lastly, the Commission could request that staff return with additional information and analysis and continue this discussion at a future public meeting. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Okay. Do any of the commissioners have questions of Martha? I can't see the screens if any hands are up.
Jim,
Okay.
Bob, go ahead, please.
Okay, Martha, I had forwarded some questions in regard to fencing, whether chain link fencing is specifically excluded, and also for you to give me all of us an explanation of larger vehicle parking such as RVs, and also the use of pods or cargo type containers for home remodel construction projects.
So the toolkit currently does not allow for certain types of fencing, which includes barbed wire or razor wire fencing. It does allow for chain link fencing. So if the commission thought that wasn't appropriate, we could modify the toolkit as such. In addition to larger vehicle parking, Bob, you had asked if this is allowed in Corte Madera. If, for instance, someone could park an RV on their private property, and there currently is nothing in the zoning ordinance that precludes someone from parking an RV on their private property. They cannot park it on the street unless it's being loaded, and there's also standards that limit them from doing any repair. But there's nothing specific in Title 18 that says you cannot park an RV on your property. There used to be limitations in Title 15 of the municipal code that were removed at one point, and it possibly may have been intended to have been added into Title 18, but that did not occur. And then I think your last question was about freight containers being used. So generally, when there's a construction project, it's not uncommon for people to have containers in front of their yard or on the street, a debris box. And when they do, they are required to get an encroachment permit from the town to have that in the right of way.
I guess the question I had was that the cargo or freight containers are not permitted beyond 10 days, but we do give encroachment permits for those. So I thought that was inconsistent.
And so we could make a change to the toolkit if you felt 10 days wasn't enough. And I believe, I'll double check, but I think that if it's on private property versus in the right of way, it's kind of a different permit. The toolkit only applies to private property versus public property. So what's in the street.
Yeah, well, a lot of these do get, in the street. On private property, they're, in either case, they may be there for months, but they're permitted because of a construction project usually. And I would say, we would want to allow that to happen under permit. The other question that I brought up, just because razor wire fencing was not prohibited, but I thought there was a section in our municipal code that prohibited the use of chain link fences in the front yard.
That could be. I'd have to double check. And again, the fencing standards in the toolkit would be what would be applied. So even if it's not allowed in Title 18 in the zoning ordinance and someone submits a project through the toolkit, we would use the standards in the toolkit. And if the commission feels there should be additional prohibitions on fence types, then that's something that you can discuss and make recommended changes related to fencing. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes, Martha, would you mind just briefly bringing us through the process if someone brought you like a 16 unit mixed use project that's going to go under this new odds code, and what first of all, how is the developer going to analyze all of the restrictions? Are they going to first go to the general plan and then the odds, and then are there any other codes or restrictions that are within our current design guidelines that the developer will have to adhere to? Or does it, kind of what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Would you just take us through the process if someone brought you a proposal would they first come to you, and then does it ever come to us for any kind of approval, so everybody can kind of be aware of what the process is?
Yeah, so there's kind of two different buckets of projects. The first is a ministerial process. So that's if state law is saying you cannot have a discretionary review. So currently that just applies to a project filed under Senate Bill 35, which the town is not subject to, and then Senate Bill 9. And this Senate Bill 9 is a very new piece of legislation, and we're still working through a lot of the nuances of it. But that bill requires a ministerial review for projects. And again, that could be a lot split and then a duplex on the properties, or it could be adding additional units to an existing single family home. So individuals still do need to meet density ranges and also floor area that's established in the general plan. So even if the toolkit may allow for a denser project based on setbacks and forms than maybe what the general plan currently allows. So they would be potentially limited on the size of the building or the number of units, based on the general plan. So then the second set of projects that could be submitted are projects submitted under the Housing Accountability Act. And this does not limit the ability for the town to require a design review process. So a project that comes in that is consistent with Housing Accountability Act, and again, that's really any multifamily housing project, would pick at the onset of the project if they wanted to use the toolkit or if they wanted to use the standards in Title 18. And regardless of what they chose, that project would eventually go before the Planning Commission and would be evaluated. Just that the standards that they use would depend kind of on that initial decision that they make. And then in regards to how we would evaluate a project, we would first look at what the zone is of that property. And then we would evaluate that they're consistent with the various development standards. So we start with Chapter 3, which has the standards such as setbacks and heights and parcel sizes as a starting point. And then we would, there's also several standards in Chapter 5 related to things such as parking and screening and privacy. So we would evaluate to make sure that they were meeting those objective standards as well. And then while it's not required, they would also use the design guidelines as part of the development of the project. And we would want to make sure that certain aspects of those design guidelines were incorporated into the project. But they're not required to use, to follow it entirely. There's some room, some ability for them to modify standards or not follow it to the T.
And those, like for the T3 edge neighborhood, if they go with the new design standards or the odds handbook, they wouldn't also adhere to Chapter 18 because like some of the setbacks are a little different, right? You got to choose one or the other.
Correct. And I would like to point out that Senate Bill 9 allows for some decreased setbacks beyond what was in the toolkit. So some of the changes that we're recommending, and I can go over those in a minute, are to reduce setbacks to be consistent with what is allowed by the state law.
Okay. And just to clarify that, Commissioner Rizzo, if an applicant would have to come into the town offices and say they would be applying under essentially an SB 9 regulations. If they say that and they do that, and they submit an application pursuant to the SB 9 regulations, they must use the odds toolkit. They don't have an option, right? Because the point is that it's a ministerial review. There is no opportunity to sort of massage a project through the design review process the way that this commission is used to and the town is used to. So the whole point is that we would at least get minimum standards to ensure that whatever does get built pursuant to the SB 9 project or an SB 35 project in the future locks in certain design standards that meet certain expectations for the town in terms of development. It doesn't leave it all up in the air. And that's because there is no design review process. So it's staff level review. You'll never see it. The commission will never see it. And it will, obviously will publicize the fact that there's a project, but it's not going to be vetted through a commission process. And the one difference would be that I think Martha explained would be if they don't fall under those and they don't apply under those specific state legislations or pieces of state legislation that eliminate our ability to do design review, but it's then we're going to say, all right, well, now you do choose which ones you're going to use to develop your project. And I think the reason why we wanted to leave that choice, whether you go under the current rules that you have, for example, and I think Martha's talked about this in the past, but like think of 645 Tamalpais, the 3-unit apartment proposal that we've had a study session on in the last year. They're using our existing development standards to develop that, the zoning code. That could still be an option because essentially the odds really wouldn't work for that site. So we wanted to give flexibility there. And hopefully that explains sort of how a developer would come in and the odds would be used. And really it's relatively limited, I think, the number of times we're actually going to see this toolkit be used for multifamily housing development. Because of that, unless they fall under these pieces of state legislation, then yeah, they're going to kick into that automatically.
And I'll also add there will be administrative changes that we'll need to make to all processes to amend application forms and that sort of thing to help guide people when they come in with an application.
Yeah.
So if they don't fall under SB 35, would they still go through discretionary review if they use the odds, or is it still staff level?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. If we don't preclude, if state law doesn't preclude our design review process, we're still going to go through the design review process. And it could be with odds or it could be under our existing zoning rules. And we're gonna force the applicant to choose one or the other at the beginning of the process.
And how hard is it going to be? My last question. I know it's getting late. How hard is it going to be for you guys to modify the odds document after it gets adopted if you start finding conflicts with the code? And obviously, I think we've discussed in the past a little bit about the need of possibly increasing density at some point if these things don't make sense. Like how hard is that going to be? Is it going to be the same process, or will it be relatively easy after you guys find
yeah,
So
go ahead, Martha.
It would be an amendment to the ordinance, so it does require a public hearing at the planning commission followed by 2 hearings at the council. So it's not an easy process. What we would likely do is if we discover any discrepancies or anything in the code that could use clarification, that's something we'll keep track of and then bring forth an amendment in the future that is includes potential changes.
I will take a few of them and try to amend them, the few that have conflicts at once, so that okay.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Sets. I think, and if I may, just real quick, there's probably 2 sets of changes. One is we're going to learn as we go, and there's like our existing zoning ordinance that things are going to have to get updated and amended and clarified, and that's bundled. But to your point about if we see that we are going to want to allow essentially more density in particular sites or parts of town, what's good about this is we have these other zones in the toolkit that we can potentially utilize to sort of ratchet up the allowable building typology or the buildings in those particular areas of town. So it's sort of set up in some ways to get us there. We may have to do some customization for those other zones in the future as well, but it's not a wholesale change. Like, we're not starting from square one if we want to sort of ratchet up to a different zones or ratchet down or whatever we're doing. You know, we have a palette there to work with.
Margaret, do you have any questions?
I don't, thank you.
All right. We'll open it up to public comment, if there is any.
Looks like we have a hand up from Patty Stolier. Go ahead, Patty, if you want to unmute yourself. If you'd like to have your video on, I can promote you to a panelist. Just let me know.
Not necessary. I'd have to put lipstick on again. So I just, I realized that it's now our 2nd anniversary of meeting together for the first time. So happy anniversary to our little group. And I really hope that you guys appreciate, what went into this, because it was hundreds and hundreds of pages, and then we've winnowed it down to really the nitty gritty. And I think it's amazing guidelines. What I tell people, and I consider myself not the architect professional person, but more of the Joe Blow on the street, even though I did get trained as a certified manager of community associations. So I know a little bit about the thing, but what I explain to people is that the state passed laws to try to encourage more building of housing. And in doing that, they took away some of the power that the town has to control what gets built. They used to be able to, be very picky about it. So now we put together this toolkit so that it has some basic standards that fit in with the feeling of Corte Madera and the quality of the building of Corte Madera. And that's how we use it. That's kind of how I explained it to my 14-year-old grandson. So
hired. Perfect.
It is perfect.
So for the people that know nothing about planning or building or anything, that's my 14-year-old explanation of what the OUDS toolkit is. And I look forward to seeing how it gets used and improved. And about Bob's question about the pods, couldn't it say for 10 days unless there is a special permit? So it seems like that would be pretty easy to fix. Okie doke. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Patty. Anybody else, Tracy?
I don't see any other hands raised right now.
Emails?
Check. No emails either.
Okay, we'll close the public comment section and it will come back to the commission to discuss. And why don't we start with you, Bob?
Well, I think we should also exclude on page 45, barbed wire, razor wire, or chain link fences.
They were not excluded?
Chain link fences is not mentioned.
Okay.
The only two exclusions currently are for barbed wire and razor wire.
Okay. And you would like to add chain link?
Yes. And then the other issue that Patty was also commenting on, I mean, it sounds like we do have a process to give people permits for pods or debris boxes for longer than 10 days. So I don't think we need to do anything on that.
Okay. Margaret, do you have anything that you want to discuss?
First, I want to say that I do appreciate the massive amount of creative energy that must have gone into going through all this because I'm still going through it and I'm amazed at the scope of how huge it is, how amazing it is. And I do think probably as it starts going into use, there'll be a lot of, word changes, line changes, just an example of what Bob added. Oh, we forgot to put in chain link. So what's the process that we're going to have to go through to make a change to this document or an addition or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is an ordinance amendment. The one question, and I'll ask, and we can talk about this later, but typically when you're dealing with planning and land use and you're dealing with the zoning ordinance, there's a two-step process. It goes like through the planning commission and then to the town council. This will be a new title, Title 22. We're not dealing with any changes of use necessarily in this document. So we'll have to see whether we can go straight to the town council, or probably we'd want to go through the planning commission anyways, but I think it's the safest way to say it. We'd have to develop what the ordinance would be, the specific strikeouts and additions and text. And then we would bring it to the commission for their recommendation to the town council for approval.
Because it just seems like a small change,
Yeah.
Pretty realistic change, like adding chain link fence shouldn't have to be weeks and weeks of debate.
Yeah.
To make a change like that. I can see if a big section needs to be revised, but there ought to be a mechanism to just say, oh, we forgot about such and such, we need to put it in there.
Yeah, it'd be nice. I would like that. I think what we probably would do is collect those as we hear about some issues and try to package them all together at some point in time. But unfortunately, part of the reason why we have it in here is if it's the point is, if we get an applicant who really is going to test whether or not they can do something or not, it's got to be explicit in the language of the text, or else they're going to say, well, we can do this, and we don't have the ability to actually say, no, you can't, unless it's actually explicit in the municipal code and in the ordinance.
And I have just one other, Martha, you mentioned it very quickly. Why did you separate out the architectural and signage design guidelines?
It was felt by several members of the working group, and then I think also maybe one of the commissioner members, that the standards in chapters 8 and 9 were too prescriptive. They included, a lot of standards related to window size and just very kind of detailed standards, and it was very prescriptive. And so we felt that maybe it would limit, some design creativity, that you didn't fall within this box. You couldn't, do your vision for a project. And so we just thought it would be more appropriate to have them as guidelines, and to give the design professionals the ability to, design projects and use their architectural skills, and not be, kind of put in this box that they had to follow standards that maybe didn't work for the design or the site.
Okay, so the key word there is guidelines.
They are guidelines, and they will be used by any multifamily project, regardless if they choose to use the toolkit or if they choose Title 18, since we've added that new finding to the design review chapter.
Thank you.
Okay, Jim?
Well, I'd also like to thank the staff, our staff and consultants, and all the volunteers and all the hard work that went through going through all the state legislation, all the regional organizations, all the local jurisdictions, and to address all the Housing Accountability Act and our regional housing need allocation requirements. It's just so much work. It's hard to get all out. And I know our community is super special and super difficult to design some of these bigger projects with. You guys still see me?
Yeah, no,
We don't see you, but we hear you.
All right, sorry, my thing went out. I'm gonna put it back on. All right, I'm over here.
We see you now.
Okay, sorry about that. At any rate, you know, the objective design development standards, I think is a step in the right direction. It's a necessity right now, and it's gonna help us attract some development to Corte Madera, and it's gonna give our community some control over the type, sizes, and design considerations for high density multifamily projects that falls out of our town's current discretionary review process. So I definitely think it's a necessary thing that we adopt as soon as possible. And it's really going to be really hard to, we have some unique properties. I think it's going to be hard to really establish and deal with every single little problem that we're going to come up with. And I think if the staff feels confident that we'll be able to modify these things as we go along, I'm confident that staff is working through the general plan and some of the other things that's going to make a cohesive roadmap for developers and for the commission in the future. So, I mean, I think I don't have any changes to it currently, other than I would love to see a few projects built so we have a framework to have more opinions about it, to be honest with you, because it's quite a you have to have a project to really know how it's going to work unless you go through a few of them. So, I mean, at this point, I could make the findings to move forward with it and see how it works. And then we modify it as we go along. Sorry, my camera switched from a different computer, but thank you.
Hey, thank you, Jim. I am still, even though I was a part of that working group, I am still astounded as what has been accomplished. This has been quite a feat. And Optico, the company that you chose, Adam, really did a wonderful job. They are incredible. I hope in the future, if different projects come up, they could fit in and you can consider them again, because their work is just first class all the way. I agree with Bob. I personally don't like chain link fences either. I was looking at the resolution and I don't know if it's something that has to be mentioned in the resolution or not. I'll leave it to staff to tell me. They say, I think making the design review guidelines was a very good idea because it can be used for other things, not just projects that fall under this particular category. And my only question would be, as we develop the general plan, do we have to fit the general plan to this, or do we have to have this have changes in this to meet the general plan requirements that come up as we go through the process?
Would you like me to take a swing at that?
Oh, would you please?
Of course. That's really would depend on the policy or specific goal or practice. You don't want them to be inconsistent. So if you find that there's a general plan policy that conflicts and you think the general plan policy will work better than the policy in Title 22, you're going to want to change Title 22, always keeping in mind, however, the requirement that the policies and standards in Title 22 must be something that we can administer objectively. So we don't want to adopt anything in the general plan that precludes that.
Okay. So that would be, any of the things that I want to discuss. Adam, do you have something to add?
Well, no, I mean, I think that's right. I think you're talking about if we're developing housing policy in the general plan, you do that first, and then the way I see that, the toolkit can be used actually in that regard as a tool to sort of talk about the types of projects we may want to see in our community and how to get there, and what sort of rules do we need to put in place to actually get us to a point where we're happy with all development we may see in town, not just the ones that are filed under the pieces of state legislation, but maybe in general, so anyways, but yeah, certainly the toolkit has to adapt to our general plan and whatever we decide is the appropriate policies for the town.
And the general plan takes precedence.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what I was thinking of is that part of SB 9 about the lot split.
Yeah.
Which, if I remember off the top of my head, is it has to be a minimum 7,500 square feet. It can only be split in half. It can't be 2/3 for one and 1/3 for the other.
I think 40.
It has to be vertical.
Yeah, it's like the way it works out is you could either have as small as a 2,400 square foot lot and split it 50-50. You only have to have actually 1,200 square feet remaining for each lot to fall under the lot split provisions.
Yeah,
And
and
then
the split is vertically. It's not a panhandle lot. You can't do like a panhandle
It
thing.
doesn't actually that's a different.
No, that's in SB 9.
You can, yeah, no, but you can, it doesn't explicitly state it. The shape of the lots. It does say that the town, and again, we're still reviewing this, but it does say that if we want to have an ordinance that requires street frontage or access from the street to each individual lot, we can do that. And our currently, we'd have to review a role. I believe that's what our current subdivision ordinance does do, but I don't know if that actually would apply. We have what they're calling urban lot splits. So I don't even know if it falls under the full subdivision map act, but it's going to take some more time. But as written, there's no actual requirement that each lot have physical access to a street unless the city or town requires it.
I thought there
No,
was, but the one thing I am sure of is that the split has to be equal.
Yeah, it's like 60-40 at the most.
60-40.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of area.
Yes.
So,
Okay. Is there anything else that any of the commissioners want to bring up? No. So now we will need a resolution.
And let me share my screen and show the proposed changes to address Senate Bill 9, with changes to both Chapter 1, the introduction chapter, and then also Chapter 3, the zone chapter.
Okay, now, are these mentioned specifically in the resolution?
They are not. The
Must they
changes
be
to
added?
Yeah, so it should be added as a recommendation.
Okay. And Bob's recommendation about adding in chain link fences not being allowed. Okay. Is there anyone who would like to take on the resolution? All
I can't
right.
read it.
You can't read the screen?
No, it's too small.
Yeah. Okay, well, the resolution is in the packet.
Martha, at the bottom right of the screen. Oh, you can just, there's a little
Sorry for the
slider.
interruption. Do we need to quickly extend the meeting beyond 10?
Ah, yes.
It's 10:08.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, and I'm trying, this takes a unanimous vote, am I correct?
majority vote to extend the meeting for a half hour beyond 10 p.m. Unanimous after 10:30.
Okay. Is there a motion to extend the meeting until 10:30?
I move to extend.
Second?
It's Commissioner Mandel, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The person running the meeting is not supposed to make a second motions. That's why I didn't say or do anything. Okay, we're extending to 10:30, so let's use this 20 minutes or so. In the packet, there is, I think it's attachment one. Attachment one is the resolution. Would somebody like to make the resolution and refer to, the whole thing wouldn't have to be read, it would just be changes to Title 22, et cetera, et cetera.
So is
And
it,
is there a way it should be
Just the-
referenced?
okay.
Excuse
I'm
me?
not sure what we're supposed to read.
Um,
And do you want
Sure. I would think that the motion itself would only need to state that you move that the commission adopt the resolution in the packet with the following changes, that the commission further recommends to the council that the changes set forth on attachment 4 as revised today be made to Title 22, and in addition, Title 22 preclude the use of chain link fences.
Okay.
And then I think that would do it.
Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion saying to do what Ann just said? That's moving us along.
Well, in the matter of the Corte Madera Planning Commission Resolution number 21-013, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the Town of Corte Madera recommending adoption of a new title, Title 22, adopting objective design and development standards for qualifying multifamily and mixed-use projects and associated amendments to portions of Title 15, which is Chapter 15.50, and Title 18, Chapters 18.02, 18.04, 18.30 of the Corte Madera Municipal Code, and Amendment 4, Attachment 4, and referring Attachment 4 of, I think, Title 22, the amendments previously mentioned in that document, including eliminating chain link fences.
With the addition of eliminating the chain link fences.
With the addition.
Yeah. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Adam, will you call the roll, please?
Yes. Commissioner Rizzo,
Did we lose him?
no,
I think we lost him.
Commissioner
there he
Rizzo,
is.
There he is.
I'm here. I'm having all sorts of problems. Yes.
Commissioner Mandel,
Yes.
Commissioner Bundy,
Yes.
and Chair Metcalf.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay. And thank you, Martha, for all you have done on this. You have
Yeah,
really gone to town.
Thank you, Martha.
Of course, my pleasure.
I had
And
this,
Adam and Phyllis, and everybody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, Martha was the one whose project this was, working with Adam, and they've really done quite a job.
Yeah.
Okay, next with the
Is this gonna
business
be
items,
incorporated?
what?
is this going to be incorporated in the public meetings that are starting tomorrow night? Is it going to be explained or talked about?
Yes, not at the tomorrow night's meeting, but we will sort of talk about the housing policy work that we've been doing, probably at the November meeting.
Okay.
It takes a whole meeting though to actually explain it. So
Yeah, it's,
I'm going to record what Patty said and I'll use that.
That was great.
It was really good.
Patty does great presentations,
I don't know.
really does.
No, she ought to write that up. That's,
Yeah, I am gonna go back to the tape on that. We'll get it.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, as long as you brought up the meeting for tomorrow night, I was gonna make a suggestion. The attorney did send us an email about how
Yes.
commissioners and council members should be. I was gonna suggest when we sign in, if it's a Zoom meeting, we use our personal emails and not our town emails. So there'll be no question that we are listening and being a part of it as individuals.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Is
No.
that going to be okay, or do we still need to talk to Rebecca?
You should let her know if you're gonna go. That's all.
Okay.
If you're gonna attend.
I'm just saying, if we normal, if you normally sign in using 2CM mail, don't.
Okay.
It makes no difference, but it's just a good separation. Okay, routine and other meetings, commissioners. It says, I'm going to audit at the last meeting of the council, which was kind of an interesting one. They start out by taking the same urgency action that we started out with tonight. There were two presentations, one which was very dear, celebrated Pauline Engelman's 113th birthday. I was really moving people. And Patty gave a 5-year update on age-friendly Corte Madera, and she did a superb job and did it in about 5 minutes. It was an incredible review and covered everything. Okay, into the consent calendar, the highlights would be they adopted an ordinance which is requiring property owners to obtain a fire inspection report prior to the sale or exchange of residential property, which I think is a positive step. 6A, there was a hearing that had two parts. One was the adoption of the electronic filing of campaign disclosure statements, which has been done statewide all this time, but now it's going to be done locally. And the second is one I questioned. I have contacted Todd about it, and it was repealing the voluntary expenditure ceilings because there was a misunderstanding of the definition of contribution and expenditure. Let's see. The parking lot permit program in the northern portion of Madera Gardens is now going to be permanent. That takes care of some of the problems with school parking. And they adopted a resolution extending Todd's, his salary and his contract as town manager to December the 31st of 2027. And it goes into the annual increases. And those would be the highlights.
Phyllis, I went to the meeting before that one of the planning commission, of the town council.
That's right. And we didn't have time to do it at the last meeting. So would you do it now?
Sure, but the main issue of that town council was the appeal of 33 Sonora Way.
Yes.
Which had the issue about the ranch that was down below it. And the big issues that came up were the notice issues. Mr. Simon Ranch, Mr. Simon objected to the way notice was given. And also he was objecting to the fire pit. And that was a discussion, and eventually the vote was to uphold the planning commission decision to let the building be built. And so that was the big issue of that meeting.
Okay. Next is a report from the planning director, and first will be the housing element work plan.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I think it was the September 21st meeting at the town council. I provided, there was an update on basically the housing element work plan proposal and the contracts for our consultants being approved by the town council. So that went before the council. The town council approved the work plan. They had some recommendations for staff on outreach. We've really have, I think, a great consultant team. I think we're really fortunate in that regard, because there's a run on consultants out there in the world of housing planning. But in any case, we have a good team. It's going to be a real significant workload for planning staff, Martha, myself, our other members, Phil and Tracy, we're pulling them in, and really the entire department's going to be working on this for the next year, starting tomorrow night. So actually, we've been doing it for the last couple months, but really kicking it off tomorrow night. And so if you can help by just letting people you talk to get involved and sort of getting the word out to, the first half of this workshop of our work plan is really going to be more educational and trying to just make sure people understand what we're doing and why, and some of the existing conditions of housing in Corte Madera. It's kind of interesting. We have some new information given the census has just been out in 2020. So I think there'll be more up-to-date information than sometimes in the past. Any case, it's going to be, really from starting now until ultimately this has to be submitted. There's some state laws that may change it, but we're planning on right about January of 2023, where we have to adopt it. And the Planning Commission is a major player in this adoption of the housing element, as the housing element does have to, similar to tonight with the odds, it will come to the Planning Commission for its recommendation to the town council as a update or amendment to the general plan. The housing element is one of the elements of the general plan. So we will be providing updates in planning director's report, or we'll put it on the agenda, but we'll be keeping this commission and this body in the loop on progress and what's going on. And we hope you can attend as well some of the commission meetings, but they are all available they'll be recorded as well. And we're really focusing right now on just making this really accessible as much as possible to people in the community and getting input. So that's, I can do a more formal agenda item on this if needed. Just reach out to me, let me know if you think that I can do a similar presentation about, that I did to the town council, but a lot of it actually will be discussed tomorrow evening.
Adam, may I ask you one question before you go on to the next item? When the housing element plan was done last time, there was a working group put together similar to like we did with odds of community members, because I know one of my neighbors was on it. Are you planning on doing that this time?
Yeah, actually, not the last time. The last time was relatively, because I was part of that. We didn't form a committee. No,
this before you. This is like 2009 or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So this came up at the council meeting too. We thought about it and discussed it, but I think the decision was made really to try to just bring everybody under the same tent, so to speak. I think we're not going to have an extra layer of sort of a special committee assigned to advising the direction of the work plan. I think it's actually going to be more direct between comments in the community process and just, we'll use the entire community workshops as sort of the committee, put it that way. And that's the intent. The Planning Commission will also serve a role as we have, on ultimately being that advisory board to the town council. So we'll likely come back to you for some meetings as well after the workshops and before we release the draft plan. to make sure that, you know, there aren't things that you see that weren't flagged.
What about the housing
Yeah,
needs
so-
allocation appeal?
Yeah, so related to that, we had, I think all of you know, we appealed the regional housing needs allocation that we got from ABAG, that we need 725 units. And Danforth and myself presented to the ABAG Administrative Committee on September 29th. And we were summarily sort of dismissed at the meeting that our appeal was denied. Preliminarily, I mean, they're recommending that to the fuller ABAG, I think the executive committee is how it works. And that's not happening for some time. So we won't get the official determination, but I think it's very similar to every other jurisdiction really that is appealed.
Yeah.
They are denying those appeals sort of one right after the other. So, you know, but I think we were able to make some points and let our sort of position be known on sort of some of the flaws we felt are embedded in that system we have there. So anyways, so yeah, that part of it is really over. Now we're into sort of doing an about face a little bit. And now now we get to advocate for actually, let's get through the process. And I think there's some opportunities to through the housing element work plan to actually hopefully forget about the number for a little bit and actually just talk about housing policy and have a nice dialogue and discussion with the community about what is our role in this related to this issue.
Okay. Anything on the tentative agenda items for the October the 26th?
No, we don't. We actually, at this point, don't have agenda items lined up for the next meeting.
I have a question. Are we ever going to discuss the Airbnb kind of things?
Yeah, so actually that's I can add that to my report. We did have a strategic planning meeting with the council on Friday, and actually at the community chat today, both Eli Beckman, the mayor, and Todd gave a summary of that Friday council meeting. And you'll be happy to know that at Airbnb, we are going to hire a consultant, start the process, and develop some options for us to consider, for the town to consider in terms of regulations and regulating Airbnbs. So that is on the work plan for this next year, and we already have started sort of the logistics for getting that piece of work at least into the public discussion. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Margaret.
I'm just wondering what kind of consultant you hire for that.
Yeah, well, actually, we're fortunate to have, I've reached out to a former community development director for Santa Fe in Nevada, Bob Brown, worked for us on the EV charging ordinance, streamlined ordinance, and he's very good at sort of a lot of experience and then just a well-spoken and does his research. And anyways, he's the person for this job. And a lot of it is going to be really, I think the beginning part is collecting what other people have done, different strategies and options that we could pursue, starting to collect those and do some research on any analysis that's been done on how other ordinances have worked. And then we can bring it to a public meeting and discussion with the community about what is the right policy to pursue in Corte Madera.
Because Doug Bush had already done quite a bit of preliminary work.
We did some certainly, but in a lot, in the years since, there's been a lot of changes and also just different cities have done different things and so on. But yeah, I think there's definitely already some institutional knowledge, and yeah, we had a public meeting on this back in, I think, 2017, so.
But that Doug's work could be a base, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
that you work from, because the consensus of the people who spoke that night, because I remember that meeting very well, the consensus was people did not want it. And we were certainly not going to encourage having the B&Bs here, you know, the Airbnbs or whatever they're called.
Okay.
So that's it. All right. Next is the minutes. Any questions about the minutes? This is from September 14th. We were all present. Any
Move to
changes?
approve.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You guys are quick.
We
Adjourn.
just made it in before 10:30, so we're
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, I've got 10:26 on my computer
Yeah.
here. Okay,
Well,
meeting adjourned.
Good night, everybody.